Tahitian, the hidden heart's secret poised to unfold, testing if redemption's light could pierce the final dark. Dawn broke over London like a hesitant promise, grey light filtering through the smog-choked veil that hung eternal over the Thames. Sherlock Holmes stood at the window of his Baker Street lodgings, fingers steepled against the chill glass, his hawk-nosed profile etched sharp against the pallor outside. The events of the night before lingered in his veins, like the aftertaste of morphine, bitter, insistent, defying categorization. That fissure in the tunnel's heart, pulsing with an unnatural warmth, mocked his deductive certainties. Logic had peeled back layers of deceit, Hale's greed-fueled cover-up, the rigged dynamite blasts masking something older, deeper. 61 men lost not to accident, but to a subterranean malice that whispered of forgotten rites beneath the river's mud. Watson stirred behind him, the sturdy surgeon rubbing sleep from his eyes, his moustache twitching with unspoken worry. "Holmes, old chap, you look as if you've seen the devil himself. Shall I fetch Mrs. Hudson for tea?" Holmes turned, his lean frame coiled with purpose, Inverness cape already draped over his shoulders. "No time for comforts, Watson. The chest we retrieved," Hale's confession etched in frantic script, points to a chamber beyond the fissure. Ancient workings predating Brunel's tunnel by centuries. Roman, earlier, it calls us back. Today, downstairs, the group assembled amid the familiar clutter of chemical apparatus and unanswered correspondence. Elias Crowe hunched over a mug of black tea, his burly arms scarred from pick and cave-in, soot still ingrained in his knuckles. The foreman's eyes, once hollow with survivor's guilt, now burned with resolve. That light down there. It weren't natural fire, Mr. Holmes. Felt like judgment, calling out the cowards like me. But you played that fiddle and it listened, like mercy itself. Lydia Thorne glided in, her raven hair pinned loosely, velvet gown whispering against the Persian rug. Her pale features softened in the lamplight, the widow's enigmatic allure yielding to quiet alliance. "I've arranged passage through the docks discreetly. Graves owes us that much after last night." Inspector Harlan Graves arrived promptly, his portly form squeezed into a fresh suit, rumpled no more. The Scotland Yard man clasped Holmes' hand with uncharacteristic vigour. "Reinforcements at the grate, lads. No more lone wolves, but mind the tide. Thames rises fierce today." Professor Victor Hale waited in the shadows of the foyer, slim and bespectacled, his impeccable tailoring frayed at the cuffs. The engineer's shifty eyes met Holmes's without evasion. "You have the chest. My legacy in ruins, but truth demands this. The chamber holds what I buried, artifacts from the dig that woke it. Lead on." They descended into the Thames Tunnel once more, the wrought iron staircase groaning under their weight, gas lamps flickering like dying stars. The air thickened with the river's brine, damp seeping through cracks, the distant lap of water a rhythmic dirge. Elias led with lantern high, pickaxe slung over shoulder, his gravelly voice cutting the gloom. This way, past the pool, walls still weeping from the quake. The fissure loomed wider now, its edges jagged as broken teeth. Warm light pulsed within, golden veins threading black stone, drawing them inexorably forward. Holmes knelt, violin case unclasped again, but Watson placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Not music this time, Holmes. Prayer, perhaps? Your mind wrestles angels tonight." Hale shuddered, voice thin. "I dynamited the outer vein to silence the chants. Workers hearing voices, seeing shadows. Thought it greed, ceiling for investors. But it was fear. The deep hungers for the unrepentant. They squeezed through, single file, the passage narrowing to a crawl. Rocks scraped Holmes's cape, dust coating his deerstalker. His mind raced, patterns in the light defying refraction laws, acoustic anomalies echoing Hale's admissions. Yet beneath logic stirred something primal, a thirst for meaning beyond the rational. The chamber opened abruptly, vast and vaulted, older than empire. Frescoes peeled from walls, depicting robed figures invoking river gods, serpentine forms coiling through underworlds. In the center, a stone altar cradled a crystalline heart, throbbing with inner fire, surrounded by rusted tools and skeletal remains. Not 61, but older, mingled. The air hummed, thick with ozone and incense long faded. Elias gasped, crossing himself. The lost ones. They came here drawn like moths. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth, raven tresses catching the glow. My loves, betrayed not just by Hale, but this. It fed on their despair. Graves drew his revolver instinctively, portly frame tense. Bloody hell, supernatural rot. Holmes approached the altar, hawk eyes dissecting the crystal. Not supernatural. Inspector. Subterranean phosphorescence amplified by quartz matrix. But the intent, ritual sacrifice to appease the Thames spirit, woven into local lore. The diggers pierced the veil. Hale's blasts enraged it. Hale collapsed to knees, bespectacled face ashen. I knew the legends, Celtic river guardians demanding tolls, sealed it for profit, but the voices, they promised wealth if I fed it more. The crystal flared, shadows writhing, a low moan rising like wind through tombs. Visions assaulted them, ghostly diggers clawing at walls, Hale's silhouette triggering blasts, Elias fleeing while mates screamed. Watson staggered, pipe forgotten. Holmes, it's alive, pulling at the soul. Holmes gripped the violin bow, not playing but snapping it across the crystal's edge. A sharp crack. The light spasmed, moan peaking to wail. Logic alone fails here. Faith in redemption, or we join them. Elias surged forward, pickaxe raised not in violence but offering. For me, mates, for the cowards who ran. He struck the altar's base, stone shattering, crystal fracturing with a sigh. Light exploded outward, not destructive but cleansing, washing the chamber in warmth that chased shadows. Hale wept openly, slim hands clutching debris. Forgive. A man undone by ambition. Lydia knelt beside him, her touch gentle. We all bear scars. Rise, Professor. Light breaks through. Graves holstered his weapon, humbled. Miracles in the mud. Watson steadied Holmes, who swayed, deerstalker askew. The detective's voice cracked, rare vulnerability surfacing. Reason illuminated the path, Watson, but grace traversed it. No genius escapes the heart's abyss. They emerged into daylight, chests heaving, bonds forged in the deep. Tommy Tanner waited topside, the young survivor mending under Lydia's care, his clasp pulling them into embrace. Family, not blood. Reborn. Back at Baker Street, evening fell soft, Mrs. Hudson's stew steaming, hymns rising from Elias's throat. Holmes paced slower now, inner transformation etching peace amid the lines. Yet as stars pierced the fog, a final whisper echoed, not from the tunnel, but within. One soul unaccounted, the true instigator, lurking in London's underbelly, plotting to reseal the light forever. Tomorrow's dawn carried not resolution, but the ultimate surrender. Dawn broke over Baker Street like a hesitant promise, the fog lifting just enough to reveal gas lamps flickering out against a pale sky. Sherlock Holmes stood at the window of his lodgings, deerstalker discarded on the mantel, his hawk-nosed profile etched sharper by the morning light. The violin lay untouched beside his chemical apparatus, strings humming faintly as if echoing the tunnel's dying moan. Sleep had evaded him, that final whisper coiling in his mind, not a hallucination, but a summons. One soul unaccounted for. The true instigator, whose greed had first awakened the depths. Watson stirred from the armchair, his sturdy frame aching from the night's ordeal, moustache twitching as he rubbed sleep from his eyes. Pipe smoke lingered in the air, mingling with Mrs. Hudson's fresh scones downstairs. "John," Holmes murmured without turning, "the game is not yet played out. That shadow in the chamber, Hale was its puppet, not its master. We must return to the source." Elias Crowe lumbered in from the kitchen, his burly form filling the doorway, scarred face softened by a rare grin. Mrs. Hudson's brew hit the spot. "Governor, but if there's more digging to do, me pickaxe is ready." Hymns from last night still rang in his gravelly voice, a working man's faith unearthed like coal veins. Professor Victor Hale sat hunched by the fire, slim hands trembling around a teacup, bespectacled eyes hollowed by confession. "The crystal was my folly," he whispered, voice cracking like the altar stone. But the voice before it, Lord Reginald Blackwood, the tunnel's silent financier. He whispered promises in my ear during those endless board meetings, eyes gleaming like wet shale. Sealed it not for safety, but to hoard the echoes below, trading men's lives for occult whispers of fortune. Lydia Thorne glided in, raven hair pinned loosely, velvet gown whispering against the rug. Her pale cheeks held colour now, the widow's mask shed. Blackwood courted me once before the betrayals. He vanished after the collapse, but his carriage haunts the Rotherhithe docks. If he's the serpent, I'll lead you there. Inspector Harlan Graves arrived with the clatter of boots, portly belly straining his rumpled suit. Word from the yard, Blackwood's been sighted, muttering to shadows. "But Holmes, this reeks of madness. My men are stretched thin." Holmes' eyes flashed, lean fingers steepled. "Madness is pattern without poetry, Inspector. This is poetry of the damned. We end it today." They descended to the Rotherhithe embankment as the Thames churned grey under a leaden sky, the river's breath carrying brine and rot. The Thames Tunnel's mouth yawned nearby, iron gates padlocked but trembling faintly. Blackwood's derelict warehouse loomed adjacent, its brick facade crumbling like forgotten vows, gashes in the walls exhaling damp mist. Inside, crates of rusted tools from the 1840s dig loomed like tombstones, air thick with mould and the tang of old lime. Footsteps echoed as they pushed through the creaking door. In the centre, Lord Reginald Blackwood knelt before a makeshift shrine, an obsidian shard pulsing with the same sickly light as the crystal. Tall and gaunt in his 60s, silver hair wild, aristocratic features twisted into fanatic zeal. His voice rasped like grinding gears. "You come too late. The tunnel hungers eternally. 41 souls freed. Mere bait. Feed it the rest, and fortunes rise from the silt." Holmes stepped forward, Inverness cape swirling. "Your ledgers betray you, Blackwood. Investments in psychics, seances, not engineering but excavation of the unseen. Hale was your front, the blasts, your ritual." Blackwood laughed, a hollow bark, rising with shard in hand. "Reasons blindfold, Holmes. I heard them first, the digger's chorus, promising gold if I deepened the vein." Elias fled. Hale quaked, but I embraced it. Witness. He smashed the shard against a crate and the floor shuddered. Cracks, spider-webbed outward, exhaling cold wind laced with distant cries. Visions flickered. The 1895 collapse. 102 men vanishing into abyss, 41 crawling out haunted. Tommy Tanner's boyish face among survivors, now waiting topside with bandages fresh. Watson drew his revolver, heart pounding. "Enough! This ends now." But Blackwood lunged, shard glowing toward Holmes. Lydia intercepted, her hand clamping his wrist. "For the lovers you drowned in debt." She twisted, and it clattered free. Elias swung his pickaxe, not to strike flesh, but to pulverize the shard. Shards exploded in a burst of frost, cries peaking, then fading to silence. Blackwood staggered, clutching his chest, eyes widening in the light's retreat. No, the wealth. Hale approached, voice steady for the first time. "Wealth bought nothing but chains, Reginald. Release it." Tears carved paths down his cheeks as Blackwood slumped, gasping. The Lord's gaze met Holmes's, not defiance but fracture. "Forgive." A fool chasing echoes. Graves cuffed him gently. The inspector's face etched with reluctant pity. "To Newgate with you, but Holmes, how did you know?" Holmes knelt amid the debris, hawk nose inches from the dust, inhaling the settling calm. The whispers were arithmetic, Inspector, frequencies matching the tunnel's arches, but their cessation, that required grace. They emerged into midday sun, piercing the clouds, a rare warmth bathing the docks. Tommy Tanner rushed forward, crutches thumping, young face alight. "It's quiet now, sir, no more dreams of the dark." Back at Baker Street that evening, the hearth glowed steady. Mrs. Hudson's roast perfumed the air, plates clinking in rhythm with low conversation. Elias carved the meat, his burly arms steady, humming a psalm. Lydia poured tea, her touch lingering on Hale's shoulder. the professor nodding with quiet resolve. Graves lifted a glass, rumpled suit smoothed for once, to the living. Watson watched Holmes, who sat violin in hand, bow drawing forth a melody soft and searching, not triumphant, but healed. The notes wove through the room, chasing lingering shadows from corners. "John," the detective said later, as stars wheeled above the fog, "logic dissects the crime. But the soul demands surrender. Blackwood's abyss mirrored my own isolation. No genius outruns grace." Holmes paused, eyes distant. "Yet London breeds new mysteries. A letter arrived this morning, another vanishing in the fog-shrouded alleys." Watson smiled, pipe aglow. Then the game renews. The circle tightened, family forged in depths, each carrying scars as lanterns. Redemption's light flickered imperfect, demanding daily tending, but it held, against the Thames's eternal murmur, against the heart's hidden tunnels. And in the quiet after, as bonds deepened and futures beckoned, one truth endured. No darkness withstands the dawn's persistent grace. Subscribe for more cases that test your deduction skills. The river's underbelly groaned like a beast in labor. The Thames Tunnel's arched brick ceiling dripping with ceaseless moisture that pooled at Elias Crowe's boots. He gripped the lantern handle until his knuckles bleached white, its flames sputtering against the fetid air, thick with lime dust and the metallic tang of fear. 102 men had descended that dawn into the labyrinthine depths for what Professor Victor Hale promised would be a routine reinforcement dig, shoring up the old shield tunnels before the spring floods. Elias, the burly foreman in his 50s, scarred across one cheek from a cave-in 2 decades past, led them, his voice barking orders over the clank of picks and the distant rush of water pressing from above. Now, as the last echoes of their labor faded, Elias wiped sweat from his soot-blackened brow and turned to tally his crew. Faces gaunt in the lamplight stared back, but not all. 61 were missing, swallowed. The word lodged in his throat like gravel. No cave-in had sounded. No cry of alarm pierced the gloom. Just absence. His heart hammered a traitor's rhythm as he forced his legs to move toward the whopping entrance, the 41 survivors shambling behind, their eyes darting to shadows that seemed to writhe independently. Up on the fog-choked docks of Rotherhithe, gas lamps hissed against the winter dusk of 1895, casting elongated spectres across the wharves, where East End labourers hawked fish and gin. Elias burst from the tunnel mouth first, collapsing to his knees on the slick cobbles. Inspector Harlan Graves, portly and rumpled in his Scotland Yard woolens, lumbered forward from his vantage by a tethered barge. "Crowe, what in blazes?" Graves bellowed, his moustache twitching. "Where's the rest?" "Hale's paying good sovereigns for this job finished." "Gone," Elias rasped, voice raw as stripped cable. "All gone, like the devil took 'em one by one." The inspector blanched, glancing at the yawning black moor. No cave-in, no flooding. Elias shook his head, the scar on his face pulling tight. Worse. They was there, then they wasn't. Heard whispers first, low like wind in the vents. Then screams cut short. I ran, Inspector. Grabbed who I could and ran. Word spread like cholera through the docks. By nightfall, the Thames Tunnel, a decaying marvel from the 1840s, once hailed as the eighth wonder, now a pedestrian rat run and occasional work site, stood cordoned by constables. Professor Hale arrived in a hansom, slim and bespectacled at 60, his tailored coat impeccable despite the drizzle. He pushed through the crowd, shifty eyes narrowing at Elias. "This hysteria ends now, Crowe. My investors expect results, not ghost stories. You'll tell your tale to no one, until I say." But Elias's gaze hardened, haunted depths flickering with something fiercer than fear. "Not this time, Professor. Not after what I saw. Across the Thames, in the warm clutter of 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes lay sprawled on the settee, the needle's puncture fresh on his forearm. The 7% solution coursed through him, a false clarity chasing the void that had gnawed since his last great adversary slipped into Reichenbach's Falls 2 years prior. At 42, the lean hawk-nosed detective felt the cape of his Inverness coat heavy as lead, his deerstalker tossed aside amid vials and violin strings. Reason had failed him there, logic crumbling against chaos. Now, in the gaslit haze of his sanctuary, cluttered rooms, redolent of shag tobacco and chemical residue. He chased oblivion, the mind palace fracturing. Dr. John Watson, sturdy in his late 40s, moustache bristling with concern, paced the Persian rug. His army surgeon hands clenched a telegram, the paper crisp from Scotland Yard's hasty dispatch. "Holmes, enough of this poison. You're wasting away. Graves wires about the tunnel. 102 diggers in, 41 out. No bodies, no trace. Sounds like your sort of puzzle." Holmes's sharp grey eyes flickered open, pupils dilated but piercing. The cocaine sharpened the edges of boredom into intrigue. Yet beneath lurked a deeper ache, a soul adrift, questioning if deduction alone could anchor a man against the abyss. Watson had seen it grow since Switzerland, the reclusive genius bordering on the profane, mocking churches as opium for the masses, while his own veins became altars to emptiness. "A biblical vanishing, Watson," Holmes murmured, rising with predatory grace. 61 souls plucked from the earth's gut. Elias Crowe, foreman, scarred veteran of the Rotherhithe works. His testimony to Graves reeks of the supernatural, which is merely the undiscovered natural. Watson handed the telegram. "Hale's involved, the engineer with ties to the railway barons. Claims it's desertion, owed wages. But Crowe's raving about whispers, shadows. Lydia Thorne's name crops up too, a widow linked to half the missing men. Inspector Graves begs your involvement, though he'd sooner gargle prussic acid." Holmes's lips curved, a ghost of his old vigour. Lydia Thorne, raven-haired siren of the docks, velvet gowns amid the muck. Her agenda always veiled, intriguing, and Hale, impeccable facade masking fiscal desperation, the tunnel itself. Brunel's folly, pressurized shield piercing clay and gravel, now festering with effluent seepage. Winter floods imminent. Perfect stage for misdirection. He shrugged into his cape, the fabric whispering against his lean frame. Watson watched, hope flickering in his loyal eyes. "This could pull you back, old chap, from whatever darkness claims you." Holmes paused at the door, violin bow in hand from earlier reverie, a melancholy strain unfinished. Darkness? Merely absence of data, Watson. Yet as he descended the 17 steps to the street, the fog enveloped him like a shroud, and for a fleeting moment reason faltered. What if some voids defied filling? The hansom rattled toward the Thames, gas lamps blurring into divine judgment or devilish jest. At the Wapping entrance, the chill bit deeper, the tunnel's breath a fetid sigh carrying echoes of picks long silenced. Elias Crowe sat hunched on a crate, flask trembling in his grip. He looked up as Holmes approached, silhouette cutting the mist. "Mr. Holmes, thank God." Elias's voice cracked, burly frame shuddering. "You gotta go down there. See for yourself. It ain't natural. Men don't just vanish." Holmes inhaled the brine and decay, hawk nose twitching. "Describe the whispers, Mr. Crowe. Exact timbre. Direction of origin. Low at first, like prayers in the dark." Elias leaned in, scarred face earnest. Then names, our names, called from the walls. Faces turned and poof. Gone. "Hale says I'm mad, sacked me on the spot. But I seen it." Professor Hale interjected smoothly from the shadows. Glasses glinting. "Mr. Holmes, a pleasure. This is labourers' panic. Gripe strikes, perhaps sabotage by Irish navvies. My records show all accounted for, save deserters." Holmes's gaze pinned him, dissecting. "Your records, Professor? Or your ledgers, balancing souls against sovereigns?" Hale stiffened, shifty eyes darting. "Speculation unworthy of you." Watson arrived breathless, pipe clenched. "Holmes, Graves is en route. Says Lydia Thorne's vanished too, last seen near the Rotherhithe shaft." Intrigue deepened to compulsion. Holmes stepped to the tunnel lip, lantern raised. The blackness stared back, pregnant with secrets. Whispers, or the river's judgment on Victorian hubris? As he descended the iron stairs, the drip-drip amplified, walls slick underfoot. Crowe followed, reluctant. 50 feet in, the air thickened, lanterns guttering. Holmes knelt, fingers tracing brick seams marred by fresh scratches, not tools but nails. Human desperation. "Listen," Crowe muttered. A susurrus rose, faint as breath on glass. "Help us." Holmes froze, pulse quickening. Not imagination. Echoes? Gases inducing hallucination? Or something reason recoiled from naming? Deeper still, a flicker, something white amid the gloom. A handkerchief? Lydia's? He lunged forward, but the shadow swallowed it. Back on the docks, Hale watched with veiled triumph, while Watson fretted. Elias crossed himself, a habit from boyhood Sundays now fervent. Holmes emerged hours later, face ashen, cape sodden. Not desertion, not accident, murder orchestrated. But by whom? And why spare 41? As fog thickened to blindness, a woman's scream pierced from the opposite bank. Lydia Thorne racing toward them, dress torn, eyes wild. Sherlock. They've come for me next. This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales of mysteries that challenge your mind and reward attention, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. Lydia Thorne stumbled across the fog-choked Rotherhithe docks, her velvet gown shredded at the hem, raven hair dishevelled and clinging to her sweat-dampened face. Her eyes, wide with primal terror, locked onto Holmes as if he were the last tether to sanity. "They've come for me next," she gasped again, collapsing into Watson's steadying arms. Shadows in the tunnel, men without faces clawing from the walls. Holmes's hawk-like features sharpened, his Inverness cape swirling as he knelt before her, voice a scalpel cutting through hysteria. "Compose yourself, Mrs. Thorne. Shadows do not pursue. Describe precisely what you saw." She shuddered, breath ragged against the relentless Thames drizzle that turned the wharf into a slick mirror of gaslight. "I was waiting near the shaft entrance, as Elias asked, bringing food for the night shift. The men had gone down hours before, laughing about extra pay for clearing that cursed blockage. Then the screams started, echoing up like damned souls. I peered in, lantern shaking. Figures moved in the dark, not our diggers. Twisted, elongated, dragging the living into cracks that shouldn't exist. One reached for me, cold fingers like river slime. Elias Crowe loomed nearby, his scarred face paling beneath soot streaks, burly frame trembling. I told her to stay back, Mr. Holmes, but she's right, those scratches down there. Not from picks, nails, men fighting to climb out. Professor Victor Hale hovered at the tunnel mouth, his bespectacled eyes flickering with impatience, impeccably tailored coat beaded with moisture. Hysteria, all of it. My records are impeccable. 102 entered for the maintenance dig on the 15th, 41 surfaced, shaken but whole. The rest? Deserted, likely spooked by cave-in rumours. Irish navvies stirring trouble amid the dock strikes. No need for your theatrics, Holmes. Holmes rose slowly, his lean form casting a long shadow that seemed to swallow Hale's words. Records, Professor? Or omissions? 61 souls vanish beneath your engineering marvel, and you speak of strikes. The Thames Tunnel, once Brunel's triumph, now a charnel house for profit. Watson felt the chill deepen, not just from the fog rolling thicker off the river, carrying the rot of sewage and fish. Holmes's skepticism masked something rarer, genuine unease. As his old friend, Watson knew the signs. The slight twitch in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his deerstalker brim. Logic strained against the irrational. Inspector Harlan Graves arrived then, portly figure huffing up the gangway, rumpled suit straining at the buttons. Scotland Yard's finest, he barked, though his bulldog face betrayed wariness. Graves here. Thorne, you're wanted for questioning. Witness to the lot. And you, Holmes, stay out. This is official. Holmes ignored him, turning to Lydia. Your lover's among the missing, I presume. Whispers in Wapping taverns name you the Tunnel Widow. Consolation for more than grief. Her pale cheeks flushed, but defiance sparked in those dark eyes. Jealous tongues, Mr. Holmes. Tommy Riley, yes, my heart. And others, lonely men far from home. They trusted me with secrets. The professor pushing unsafe shifts, cutting corners on shoring for the new rail extension. But this... ghosts? No. Something alive, hungry. Crowe nodded fervently, crossing himself again. The gesture rough from calloused hands. God help us, it's the devil's own down there. Lost my brother last year to a collapse, official story. But I heard the whispers too. Help us. Begging from the bricks. Hale's shifty gaze darted to the iron stairs descending into the Rotherhithe shaft. Enough superstition. The tunnel's stable, built to withstand the Thames pressure. Any anomalies are methane pockets fooling the senses. Yet Holmes's mind raced, piecing fragments, the fresh nail gouges, the susurrus voice like breath on glass, the vanishing white flicker, perhaps a lace handkerchief, Lydia's signature. No gases explained coordinated vanishing. Desertion left no blood-flecked walls, no abandoned tools twisted as if by frantic hands. Very well, Holmes declared, snapping open his lantern. We descend. Watson, Crowe, Mrs. Thorne, arm yourselves with candor. Graves, your plodding can guard the surface. Professor, your presence is requested. Graves spluttered protests, but Holmes was already stepping onto the groaning stairs, the metal slick with condensation. The air shifted immediately, cooler, heavier, laced with the metallic tang of wet earth and something fouler, decay masked by lime wash. Drip, drip echoed like a metronome of doom, walls curving in oppressive embrace, gashes from decades of service now weeping moisture. 50 feet down, the group huddled, lanterns carving yellow pools in the void. Crowe led, his pickaxe slung over shoulder, muttering prayers in a gravelly brogue from boyhood Dublin slums. Lydia clung to Watson's arm, her warmth a stark contrast to the chill seeping through his ulster. Holmes paused at a side alcove, fingers probing a seam where bricks bulged unnaturally. Here, the blockage they cleared. He withdrew a magnifying glass, light-catching crystalline flecks. Not quartz. Salt, river intrusion, or tears. A low rumble vibrated through the soles of their boots, dust sifting from above. Lydia whimpered, pointing. There, the scratches climb higher, like men scaling a grave. Crowe swung his lantern wide, beam snagging on a discarded cap. Tommy Riley's, monogrammed. Blood? No, clay. But inside, a scrap of paper, sodden. They pull us in. Pray. Holmes's pulse quickened, reason fracturing at the edges. Hallucination shared by multiple witnesses, or a contagion of the mind born of guilt. Hale's investments teetered on this dig succeeding, rail links to Europe, fortunes in freight. Motive for silencing dissenters. Deeper, the tunnel forked, an unofficial spur bricked hastily. Holmes pressed a loose stone, revealing a narrow crawl space, fetid air gusting out. Voices again, faint. Help. Brothers, Lydia recoiled. That's Tommy. Before Holmes could halt her, she lunged forward, squeezing into the dark. Holmes cursed under breath, following, his lanky frame scraping painfully. Watson and Crowe close behind, the professor lagging with feigned reluctance. The crawl widened into a chamber, unsupported timbers groaning under Thames' weight, piles of rubble, but amid it, 41 chalk marks on the wall tallying the survivors, and below a pit, bottomless black, exhaling cold that frosted their breath. Lydia knelt, retrieving her handkerchief from the edge. Torn, slime-coated. I dropped it yesterday. It was here. Holmes peered down, shining light. No bottom, but shapes undulated far below, humanoid merging with mud. Echoes rose clearer. Holmes. Join us. Rationality screamed gas, echo, madness. Yet his skin crawled, a detective's instinct yielding to something primal. Faith in observation faltered. What if the unseen orchestrated this? A hand clamped his shoulder. Crowe, eyes fervent. It's judgment, sir. For our sins. The booze, the bets, neglecting the missus. The tunnel takes what we owe. Watson gripped his revolver, heart pounding. Holmes, we must retreat. This defies... A crack split the air. Timbers shifted. Hale shouted from behind, voice laced with panic. Out! Collapse! They scrambled back, debris cascading, the whispers pursuing like hounds, bursting onto the docks, lungs burning. They collapsed amid Graves's bewildered men. Holmes straightened first, ashen but resolute. Not ghosts, not desertion. A mechanism, floodgate. Poison? But the voices. Personal. Lydia clutched the handkerchief, sobbing. Tommy's alive down there. Tortured. As Graves demanded reports, a new figure emerged from the fog, a ragged urchin clutching a message tube. For the detective. From inside. Holmes snatched it, unrolling damp vellum. In scrawled ink. 41 spared to warn, the rest feed the deep. It hungers for more. Your reason won't save you. Who delivered this? Holmes demanded. The boy vanished into mist. Hale slipped away in the confusion, his silhouette vanishing toward waiting hansom cabs. Night deepened, the Thames lapping hungrily at the pilings. Watson wondered if Holmes's unassailable logic could withstand a darkness that whispered names, and what price would truth exact from them all. Fog clung to the whopping docks like a shroud, the Thames murmuring secrets beneath the creaking pilings. Sherlock Holmes held the damp vellum aloft, its scrawled words glowing faintly under the gas lamps swung by Inspector Harlan Graves's men. 41 spared to warn. The rest feed the deep. It hungers for more. Your reason won't save you. The ink smeared slightly from the moisture, but the hand was deliberate, rough, uneducated, matching the digger's marks. Graves snatched it, his portly frame heaving with exertion and irritation. What nonsense is this, Holmes? Some prank from your subterranean circus? We've got a missing crew, not a fairy tale. Holmes's hawkish eyes narrowed, mind racing through possibilities. Forgery, collusion, hallucination induced by tunnel gases. Yet the paper smelled of wet earth and lime, the precise scent from the chalk chamber. Personal, addressed to him. Crowe edged closer, his scarred face twisted in the lamplight, soot still caking his burly arms. That's Tommy's hand, sir. Little Tommy Wren. He weren't one for writing, but he'd scratch warnings on beams when the timbers groaned. Lydia Thorne stood apart, her raven hair dishevelled, velvet gown muddied at the hem. She clutched the slime-coated handkerchief, knuckles white. Tommy's alive, you said. Tortured. Her voice cracked, not with hysteria, but a raw edge that cut through the night air. If reason fails, what then? Prayers for the damned? Watson steadied her with a gentle hand, his moustache twitching under the strain. Holmes, the boy's gone. No trace. We need fresh air. A proper examination. Holmes folded the note precisely, tucking it into his Inverness cape. Baker Street. At once. Graves, seal the tunnel. No one enters until dawn's light reveals what shadows conceal. The inspector grumbled but nodded, waving his men to cordon the entrance with ropes and lanterns. Hale had vanished, his shifty silhouette lost to the fog-shrouded alleys, but Holmes noted the direction, toward the grand houses of Rotherhithe, where engineers of means retreated. A hansom cab rattled up, its horse snorting steam into the chill. They piled in, Holmes, Watson, Lydia and Crowe squeezed onto the worn leather seats. The vehicle lurched forward, wheels splashing through puddles that reflected the gaslit haze. Inside, silence reigned at first, broken only by the clip-clop and distant cries of dockside hawkers. Crowe broke it, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over drills. It started weeks back, Mr. Holmes. Professor Hale pushed us deeper, past the old supports. Said there was Roman gold, forgotten tunnels from the ancients, but the air turned sour, sulphur, whispers. Men saw shapes in the dark, felt hands on their necks. Elias paused, rubbing his scarred cheek. I laughed it off. Booze-fueled fancies, till the night of the dig. 102 souls, strong backs all. We hit a void, black as pitch, colder than the Thames in winter. Lydia leaned forward, her pale face ghostly in the passing light. Tommy spoke of it last, the deep he called it. Said it sang your sins back to you, booze for me, cards for him, neglecting the wife, the kids. Her eyes met Holmes's challenging. You chase facts, detective. What if the deep's the fact no reason explains? Holmes's fingers drummed his knee, a rare tell of unease. Echoes, perhaps, geological vents carrying sound, mass delusion from methane, yet the names, my name. He trailed off, staring into the fog-veiled streets. Victorian London unfolded around them, top-hatted gentlemen hurrying to opium dens, flower girls shivering under shawls, the distant toll of Big Ben marking 11 strikes. Watson lit his pipe, the tobacco's rich aroma cutting the cab's damp staleness. I've seen hysteria in the Afghan hills, Holmes, men swearing gin dragged their mates away, but this, 41 chalked survivors, 61 gone. No bodies, no cave-in trace beyond that pit. The cab jolted to a halt outside 221B Baker Street, the familiar gas lamps casting warm pools on the stoop. Mrs. Hudson met them at the door, her brow furrowed. "Gentlemen, at this hour? Tea?" Holmes waved her off, striding up the 17 steps. The sitting room enveloped them, cluttered with chemical apparatus, unanswered correspondence, the Persian rug bearing scorch marks from experiments past. He lit the lamps, shadows fleeing to corners, and spread the vellum on the deal table amid violins and folios. Crowe slumped into an armchair, massive frame dwarfing it. Lydia paced, her skirts whispering. Watson poured brandy from the decanter, handing glasses round. "Analyze it," Holmes urged himself silently. "Paper. Mill-marked from Wapping stationers used by foreman. Ink, common iron gull, fresh within hours. Phrasing, biblical cadence, feed the deep, hungers for more. Apocalyptic, not illiterate babble. A knock echoed, sharp, insistent. Graves, breathless, rumpled suit askew. Holmes' trouble. My man at the tunnel entrance, found him chalked on the wall. 40-second mark. Raving about voices before he collapsed. Says the pit's rising. Holmes seized his deerstalker back to the tunnel, but Lydia barred the door, desperation flaring. "Wait. Tommy gave me this before he went down." She pulled a locket from her bodice, snapping it open. Inside a tiny map, crudely etched, showing the tunnel's vein veering into unmarked voids. Hale knew. He charted it for profit. Damn his legacy. Crowe's fist clenched. Gold, lies. It was for the occultists, rich fools paying to summon what lurks below, Freemasons, spiritualists, Hale's patrons. Watson examined the locket, mustache bristling. This changes nothing. Gases, greed. Explainable. Holmes's mind whirled. Hale's shifty eyes, the whispers calling his name. Reason's fortress cracked. What if the deep was no metaphor, but a force preying on guilt, his own? Years of detachment, cocaine vials hidden in the drawer, Watson's worried glances ignored. Graves pounded again. "Holmes!" They rushed out, piling into a growler, the ride back blurred, streets emptying, fog thickening to soup. At the docks, chaos, lanterns swaying, men shouting. Graves's new tally-marked officer lay insensible, breath ragged. Down they plunged again, lanterns cutting the gloom. The chamber unchanged, pit exhaling frost. But now chalk number 42 gleamed fresh, and scratched beside it. "Holmes comes next." Lydia gasped. "He knows you're coming." Crowe crossed himself, a rare piety surfacing. "Pray, detective. Reason's blind down here." Holmes shone his light into the abyss. Shapes stirred clearer, limbs entwining mud, faces half-formed, mouthing silently. "Join us." The cold seeped into his bones, logic buckling under primal dread. A low rumble built, timbers groaning. Watson yanked his arm. "Out!" They fled as pebbles rained, whispers chasing, "Sherlock, your sins." Surfacing, gasping, Holmes confronted the unyielding night. Hale must be found. The truth, whatever its form, demanded pursuit. But as the Thames lapped greedily, he wondered if some void swallowed light entire. Dawn crept grey over the spires, but Holmes felt no relief. Graves cornered him dockside. Hale's carriage sighted, headed to the Professor's Rotherhithe manse. "Shall we?" Holmes nodded, resolve hardening. Yet inwardly, faith in pure deduction wavered. The deep hungered, and it knew his name. Back at Baker Street later that morning, as Watson bandaged a scraped hand, Holmes stared at the vellum. Crowe and Lydia had stayed, fortifying with tea. The urchin messenger, paid by whom? Hale silencing witnesses. Lydia softened, touching Holmes's sleeve. Tommy believed in redemption, said the deep offered none, but up here. Grace. Holmes recoiled inwardly. Grace? Sentiment? Yet the chalked warning burned. Your reason won't save you. Watson cleared his throat. Holmes, we've faced Moriarty's web. This is no man. Perhaps no man at all, Holmes murmured, the words tasting foreign. Graves burst in unannounced. Hale's place. Empty. Servants say he fled at midnight, papers burned. But this. He thrust a singed blueprint, tunnel schematics, marked with occult symbols, circles, eyes the deep's abyss annotated in Hale's precise hand. The professor consorts with darkness, Crowe growled. Holmes traced the lines. Not darkness. Design. A floodgate? Ritual chamber? Lydia's eyes welled. Tommy's map matches. As resolve settled, a new whisper, not from the tunnel but Holmes's conscience. Sins unconfessed, isolation, hubris. Watson's loyalty strained, Irene's ghost lingering. We raid Hale's study at dusk, Holmes declared. Answers await. But as they planned, fog rolled thicker, muffling London. The deep stirred above ground now, tendrils of doubt invading the detective's sanctum. Comment if you've known someone who found their way back. Dusk bled into the fog-choked streets of Rotherhithe, where the Thames whispered secrets against weathered wharves. Holmes led the way, his Inverness cape slicing through the chill like a blade, Watson at his flank with revolver holstered, but hand steady. Crowe lumbered behind, fists clenched as if spoiling for the fight he'd fled years ago, while Lydia kept pace in her velvet cloak, her raven hair a shadow among shadows. Graves had grumbled about procedure but joined, his portly frame huffing against the incline to Professor Hale's manse. The house loomed on a bluff overlooking the river, its Georgian facade cracked by neglect, gas lamps flickering like dying eyes in the casements. Vines strangled the iron gates, and the air hung heavy with brine and rot, the kind that seeped into lungs and lingered. Holmes paused at the threshold, magnifying glass in hand, scanning the disturbed gravel. Footprints, Hale's precise boot and another, smaller, frantic. The urchin, or a servant fleeing whatever madness had unfolded here. They breached the door with Crowe's shoulder, the wood splintering like brittle bone. Inside, the study awaited, a cavern of oak panels and towering shelves, blueprints unfurled across a massive desk, like the entrails of some dissected beast. Ash littered the hearth from hasty burnings, but remnants survived, charred edges of diagrams depicting not just the Thames Tunnel's arches, but extensions burrowing deeper into substrata marked with arcane sigils. Eyes within triangles, spiraling voids labeled "The Abyss Calls." Holmes knelt, inhaling the acrid smoke, his hawkish features taut in the lamplight. Logic demanded patterns, yet these mocked him, symbols from forbidden tomes he'd once dismissed as charlatanry. Hale, the rational engineer, had danced with delusion, or revelation. Watson lit a fresh lamp, casting long shadows that writhed like the tendrils Holmes had glimpsed below. "John, look here." He lifted a half-burned journal, pages brittle under his surgeon's fingers. Entries chronicled the dig. 102 men descending that fateful night in 1887, lanterns bobbing into the gloom. Then panic, whispers from the walls, a hunger that pulled at minds. 41 clawed out, babbling of the deep, a presence older than the river, awakened by Hale's ambition to pierce some mythical vein for unlimited power. Crowe snatched the book, his scarred face paling further. "That's Tommy's hand on the margins, notes from the lads." "It knows our sins," he read aloud, voice gravelly with suppressed rage. Promised riches, Hale did. Gold seams, they said, but it was lies. The deep feeds on guilt, drags you under if you let it. Lydia traced a symbol, her pale fingers trembling. Tommy sketched this before he went back in. Said Hale bargained with it, offered souls for silence. Graves snorted, rummaging drawers. Superstition. Man's greed did this. Collapse, maybe poison gas. But Holmes, this ledger, payments to the missing men's families, hush money. Hale covered tracks. Holmes's mind raced, piecing the mosaic. The tunnel, built in the 1840s as Brunel's marvel, now a rat run for smugglers and worse. Hale's firm contracted for repairs, but these plans suggested excavation for profit, illegal delving into forbidden depths. Yet the symbols, they echoed the chalk scroll, sins chasing. His own sins, years of detachment, Watson's quiet wounds from neglected comradeship. The void left by Irene Adler's shadow. Did the deep merely amplify what lurked within? A creak from upstairs shattered the hush. They froze, weapons drawn. Holmes signaled silence, ascending the grand staircase, carpet muffling their steps. The air grew colder, thicker, carrying a faint, briny reek like the tunnel's breath. Hale's bedroom door hung ajar, moonlight slicing through grimy panes to illuminate a figure slumped by the window. Professor Victor Hale himself, bespectacled eyes vacant, slumped over a valise stuffed with gold sovereigns and more blueprints. Hale stirred at their approach, shifty gaze sharpening. "Crowe, you rat. Come to finish it?" Holmes stepped forward, voice steel. "Professor, the truth surfaces. The deep, what is it? Gas, madness, or your fabrication to silence diggers?" Hale laughed, a wet, hollow sound, clutching his chest as if pain lanced him. "Fabrication? Oh, Mr. Holmes, your reason is a frail lantern in the abyss. We pierced too deep, found the vein, pulsing with promise. Whispers offered fortune, but demanded tribute. Sins confessed or claimed. The men, they carried burdens, debts, betrayals, lusts. The deep absolved for a price." Lydia recoiled. "Tommy sought redemption, not damnation." "Redemption?" Hale sneered, rising unsteadily. "There is none. Only bargain or drown. I tried to warn them. Burn the evidence, flee. But it follows. Knows you now, detective. Your isolation, the lives you dissect without heart." Holmes felt the words like a chill draft, probing cracks in his fortress of intellect. Hubris, yes. He'd admitted it in fleeting moments. But faith in evidence alone? Watson watched him, mustache twitching with unspoken concern, loyalty an anchor amid the storm. Graves cuffed Hale roughly. "You're under arrest. Manslaughter, conspiracy." "No," Hale thrashed, eyes wild. "It's coming. Listen." The river sings. A low rumble echoed, not thunder, but the Thames itself groaning as if roused. Windows rattled, dust sifting from cornices. Crowe paled, muttering prayers half-remembered from boyhood chapel. Lydia clutched a crucifix necklace, whispering grace upon them. Holmes peered out, fog boiling unnaturally, shapes twisting below, like hands grasping from the murk. Illusion? Mass hysteria? Yet his pulse thrummed with uncharacteristic dread. They dragged Hale down, but as they exited into the night, the professor collapsed, foaming at the mouth, eyes rolled back. Poison? Seizure? Watson knelt, probing futilely. Gone. The deep, claims another. Back at Baker Street by midnight, the group splintered by exhaustion. Crowe nursed whiskey-tainted tea, recounting lost mates' tales. Men who'd entered whole, emerged hollow-eyed, haunted by visions of submerged judgment. Lydia shared Tommy's letter, penned before vanishing. "The deep mirrors our souls," Hale says. "Face it or be consumed." Watson stoked the fire, glancing at Holmes, who paced, pipe unlit. Old chap, Hale's ravings, sins, redemption, sounds biblical. Perhaps there's more to man than mechanism. Holmes halted, staring into flames that danced like the tunnel's glow. Mechanism falters here. Crowe spoke of grace above, Lydia of belief. Even you, John, sense it. My methods unearth facts, but this hungers for the spirit. Silence stretched, broken only by the hearth's crackle and distant barge horns. For the first time, Holmes pondered the void not as void, but as mirror, reflecting flaws he'd long rationalized. Isolation had been his armor. Now it chafed. Dawn neared when the knock came. Urgent, from a docks lad bearing Lydia's mark. Another emergence. 2 more diggers, long presumed dead, crawling from a forgotten shaft near Wapping. Babbling of the deep's mercy, but marked, tattooed sigils on flesh, glowing faintly. Holmes rose, cape donned anew. We descend again, but this time armed with more than deduction. As they ventured into the fog, Watson murmured, "Holmes, if it's a mirror of souls." Then we confront not just Hale's folly, Holmes replied softly, but our own. The tunnel awaited, its maw yawning wider, promising truths that reason alone might not survive. The fog clung to the cobbles like a living shroud as Holmes led the way toward Wapping's shadowed wharves, his Inverness cape whipping in the chill Thames breeze. Watson trudged beside him, lanterns swinging, casting erratic pools of yellow light that danced across slick stones and rusted mooring rings. Elias Crowe lumbered behind, his scarred face set in grim determination, breath rasping from lungs scarred by decades of dust and damp. Lydia Thorne kept pace, her velvet skirts whispering against the ground, raven hair pinned loosely as if she'd dressed in haste for this midnight summons. The lad from the docks had vanished into the mist after delivering his message, but his words lingered. Two men, pale as corpses, clawing from a disused ventilation shaft near the old pump house. Tommy's mates or ghosts thereof. Holmes's mind raced through possibilities, amnesia induced by cave-in trauma, elaborate hoax by rivals, or some subterranean contagion warping memory itself. Yet beneath the logic, a whisper stirred, unfamiliar and insistent. Crowe had spoken of grace in the pub's dim corner earlier that night, his voice cracking on tales of prayers uttered in the dark. Lydia's eyes had held a fervor when reading Tommy's letter, as if the words bridged world's reason dismissed. They reached the pump house as the first grey light bled into the sky, a squat brick edifice hunched against the river's relentless lap. The shaft yawned nearby, a jagged maw framed by crumbling timber, exhaling fetid air thick with mould and something sharper. Brine perhaps mingled with the metallic tang of fear sweat. Shouts echoed from within, Scotland Yard's finest securing the site. Inspector Harlan Graves stood at the edge, portly frame silhouetted, rumpled suit straining as he barked orders, his bulldog face twisted in irritation at Holmes's approach. "About time," consulting detective. These two crawled out raving like lunatics, sigils carved into their arms glowing like foxfire, one's muttering about judgment from the deep. Holmes knelt by the shaft without a word, hawk-nosed profile sharp in the dawn gloom. He examined the earth, fingers sifting damp soil, noting the fresh scrapes. Human nails, desperate. Inside, muffled voices rose. Then a stretcher emerged, borne by constables. The first man, gaunt and bearded, eyes sunken like pits, bore the mark. A swirling glyph on his forearm, faintly luminescent even in daylight, resembling an ancient seal from Hale's forbidden sketches. "Elias," Holmes said quietly, rising, "do you recognize this?" Crowe leaned in, face paling further. "That's Ned Hargrove, and the other, Jack Finley. They went in with the last shift months back. Thought 'em buried under collapse. Ned, he prayed fierce down there, always clutching that silver cross his mum gave him." The men were hustled toward an ambulance wagon, but Holmes signaled Watson to follow. "John, attend them, note every word, every twitch." As Watson climbed aboard, Graves rounded on Holmes. "This is my case now, Holmes. Hale's death seals it. Poisoned by his own workers, mark my words. Cult madness in the tunnels." Lydia stepped forward, her voice steady, laced with East End steel. "Inspector, those men were Tommy's friends. They ain't mad. They seen what Hale hid." Graves snorted, but Holmes ignored him, eyes fixed on Crowe. "Take us down, Elias. The shaft they emerged from leads where?" Crowe hesitated, glancing at the glyph's eerie glow. "To the deep level, sir. Forbidden after the first cave-ins, but it's changed. Walls weep now, like living." They descended in tense silence, ropes creaking, lanterns flickering against walls slick with condensation. The air grew heavier, pressing like a fist on chests, carrying echoes of distant drips and a low hum, almost a chant. Holmes's pipe remained cold between his teeth. Deduction faltered here, supplanted by a gnawing intuition. His mind flashed to Baker Street's firelit vigil, Hale's final foam-flecked gasp, words of sin and mirror souls. Was this contagion of the mind or something older, stirring in the Thames' mud-choked veins? 50 feet down, the shaft widened into a lateral adit, braced by rotting timbers etched with hasty carvings, more sigils, prayers in Latin and crude English. Crowe pointed to a side passage, collapsed but freshly shifted, stones displaced as if by hands from below. "This way," he muttered. Ned and Jack must have tunneled through. They crawled forward, Holmes first, his lean frame navigating the squeeze with predatory grace. Watson would catalogue the survivors' tales later, but Holmes needed the source. The passage opened into the deep proper, a vast chamber where the tunnel's core met forgotten aquifers, water pooling ankle-deep, reflecting lantern light in oily rainbows. Here the air hummed louder, vibrating in bones, and the walls pulsed faintly, veined with phosphorescent fungi that mimicked the glyphs. Lydia gasped behind him. "Look, over there." In the murk, shrouded figures huddled. 3 more diggers, rags clinging to emaciated forms, eyes wide and unblinking. They turned as one, faces serene yet hollow, arms bared to show matching marks. One rose, extending a hand. "Brother," he whispered, voice echoing unnaturally, "the deep has shown mercy. Face your reflection." Holmes froze, logic splintering. Hallucination? Drug-laced air? Yet the man's eyes held recognition, not madness, but peace forged in fire. Crowe crossed himself, whispering a prayer, his burly shoulders shaking. "Elias," Holmes said sharply, "steady the lantern." But Crowe backed away, face ashen. "It's them, lost lads, but changed. They speak of grace, sir. Grace we denied down here, chasing Hale's gold-lined dreams." Lydia clutched Holmes's arm, her touch cool through his sleeve. "Tommy wrote of this. The deep strips lies bare. Hale promised riches, but it demanded truth, sins confessed or consumed." The figures advanced slowly, water sloshing, chants rising soft and insistent. Holmes's heart pounded, reason's fortress cracking. He'd unraveled empires on less, but this pierced deeper, echoing his own isolation. The cocaine vials hidden in Baker Street drawers, the scorn for sentiment that left him adrift. Watson's loyalty, a grace he'd never sought. Mycroft's distant warnings of hubris. "No," he murmured, voice taut. "Not spirits, echoes of trauma amplified." Yet as a figure neared, Holmes saw it clearly. Ned Hargrove's cross, dangling tarnished but whole. The man knelt, offering it. "Take it, seeker. Reason blinds. Faith reveals." Holmes recoiled, but Crowe surged forward, embracing the apparition. "Ned, forgive me, I ran, left you to it." The chamber trembled then, stones groaning overhead, dust sifting like ash. A crack spiderwebbed the wall, water gushing in black torrents. "Retreat!" Holmes shouted, grabbing Lydia, shoving Crowe ahead. They scrambled back through the adit, lungs burning, the hum pursuing like judgment's whisper. Above ground, gasping in fresh air, gravesmen hauled them up, faces pale at their dishevelled state. Watson met them at the pump house, notebook filled. The survivors. Holmes, they spoke coherently. Of visions, each man's past sins replayed in the walls like a mirror. Only confession freed them. And Hale. He knew, engineered it somehow, to control them. Holmes paced the wharf, fog lifting to reveal the Thames grey expanse. Engineered madness, but the sigils glow without phosphor. The cross, real. Lydia watched him, eyes searching. "Your mind was, Mr. Holmes, but the heart knows." Crowe nodded, clutching a salvaged, sigil-etched stone. "Aye." Grace pulled him out. "What's pulling you?" Graves interrupted, blustering. "Enough mysticism. We're sealing the deep. Case closed. Hale's cult disbanded." But Holmes halted him, voice steel. "No, Inspector, 61 still missing. And now emergence with marks. We return at dusk, properly equipped." As Graves stormed off, Watson clapped Holmes's shoulder. "Old chap, you're shaken." Holmes met his gaze, a rare vulnerability flickering. "John, if the deep mirrors souls." "Mine reflects what?" Watson smiled faintly. A man capable of more than deduction. Perhaps redemption awaits even geniuses. They parted for Baker Street as clouds gathered, thunder rumbling distant. But in the cab, a note slipped under the door upon arrival, from Lydia. "Tommy lives, deepest chamber. Come alone or he perishes." Holmes stared at the paper, pulse quickening. Trap? Truth? The choice loomed, reason's blade dulled against faith's insistent call. Dusk would decide, and the deep hungered still. Holmes crumpled the note in his fist. the paper's crisp edge biting into his palm like an accusation. Baker Street's gas lamps flickered through the cab window, casting erratic shadows across his sharp features as the hansom rattled over cobblestones slick with evening mist. Dusk bled into the sky, a bruised purple over London's spires, and the air carried the metallic tang of impending rain. He should tell Watson, rally Graves' men, but the words burned, come alone, or he perishes. Tommy, one of Crowe's lads, barely 20, pulled from the deep earlier that day, marked but breathing. If true, this was no trap for Holmes. It was bait for the truth. Reason screamed artifice. Lydia Thorne, with her raven hair and veiled motives, had danced too close to Hale's circle. Yet her eyes that afternoon on the wharf, haunted, not scheming, whispered otherwise. Holmes leaned back, pipe unlit between his teeth, the familiar ritual failing to steady him. For the first time in years, deduction faltered against an undercurrent he could not name. Faith? No. That was Watson's terrain. The doctor's quiet invocations in foxholes and sick rooms. This was, something primal, the deep's hum echoing in his veins like a half-remembered opium dream. The cab deposited him at the Rotherhithe wharf, where the Thames Tunnel's entrance yawned like a forgotten grave. Pump-houses loomed skeletal against the gloom, their iron frames dripping condensation. No sign of Graves' constables. Holmes had slipped away without a word, leaving Watson to pore over sigil rubbings by the fire. The foreman, Elias Crowe, would be nursing his scarred hands in some dockside alehouse, muttering prayers to a god he'd cursed for decades. Holmes descended the spiral stair alone, lantern in hand, the flame sputtering against damp walls that wept black rivulets. The adit stretched endless, its brickwork scarred by recent collapse, air thick with mould and the faint, acrid bite of phosphor residue. Footsteps echoed unnaturally, swallowed by the river's muffled roar overhead. Holmes moved methodically, cataloguing anomalies, fresh boot prints in the sludge, not Crowe's heavy tread, nor the survivors. Lydia's, delicate, purposeful. His mind raced through possibilities, ambush, Hale's hired thugs, hallucinogenic gas lingering from the sigils. Yet, deeper, unbidden, came the chamber's memory. Walls pulsing with visions, sins laid bare. What sin stalked Holmes? The cocaine vials hidden in his desk drawer. Moriarty's shadow, the one case that nearly broke him. Or Irene Adler, the woman whose intellect mirrored his own, lost to pride. A side passage branched unmarked on surveys, exhaling colder air. Holmes veered in, lantern raised. There, Lydia, silhouetted against bioluminescent veins snaking the stone. She turned, pale face luminous in the glow, velvet gown muddied at the hem. "You came," she whispered, voice threading the silence like silk. "Alone. I hoped." Holmes advanced, gripped tight on his stick. "Mrs. Thorne, or whatever your true name, speak plainly. Tommy, proof." She extended a hand, trembling, revealing a scrap of cloth clutched in her fingers. His neckerchief, embroidered with a miner's lamp, Crowe's gift to his nephew, vanished weeks prior. "Found yesterday, deepest chamber." He whispered my name before. Fading. Holmes snatched it, inhaling the faint soap of youth amid earth. Genuine. But why summon me? Her eyes glistened, not with tears but fervor. "Because Hale fears you. The sigils, they're his, drawn from old rites meant to bind the men. Confessions fueled the light, freed some, but Tommy, he saw Hale's heart. The professor killed the rest to silence it. Greed for the vein below, gold-tainted ore, hidden from investors." Holmes's pulse steadied, logic reasserted. Extortion. Hale engineers collapse, blames phantoms, claims insurance while pocketing treasure. The visions, drugs in the lamps. Worse, she said, stepping closer, her perfume clashing with the tunnel's rot. The rites work, the deep. It listens, mirrors us. Hale confessed nothing, it consumes him still. A low hum stirred, vibrating through souls. The walls shimmered, sigils igniting unbidden, casting writhing shadows. Holmes seized her arm. Out. Now. Too late. The passage sealed behind with a grind of stone, dust cascading. Lydia gasped, clutching his sleeve. It's beginning. Light bloomed, not phosphor, inner fire. Faces etched in the brick, Holmes's own, younger, at Reichenbach, syringe glinting as Moriarty plummeted. Failure, addiction's grip. The woman scorned. Voices murmured, pride blinds, reason alone devours. He staggered, vision blurring. No hallucination. Force it. But the hum burrowed, stripping layers. Cocaine's haze in Baker Street nights, Watson's worried glances ignored. Cases solved, lives saved, yet solitude his prison. The mirror cracked wider. His mother's grave, logic's cradle forged in grief's forge. Faith dismissed as weakness. Lydia knelt, hands clasped. Confess, Mr. Holmes. Let it go. I cannot, he rasped, throat raw. Logic is my anchor. Her voice cut through. Anchor or chain? Tommy clung to lies. It took him. The vision shifted. Tommy, boyish face twisted, clawing at sealed rock, Hale's shadow looming, knife flashing not in blood but ritual cut, sigil carved into flesh to bind silence. Truth pierced, not murder for awe but sacrifice to appease the deep's hunger, Hale twisted by his own unconfessed greed. Holmes roared denial but stone parted, revealing a crevice. Inside, huddled form. Tommy, alive, shivering, arms etched with fading marks. Uncle Elias, said Grace pulls through. Lydia moved to him, but Holmes barred her. Wait, Hale. He comes. Footsteps echoed from the adit. Professor Victor Hale emerged, lantern high, bespectacled eyes wild behind smeared lenses, impeccable suit torn, hands blackened. Thorne, he snarled, treacherous wench. And you, Holmes, should have stayed topside. The sigils flared brighter, Hale's face contorting as his own visions assailed. Ledgers falsified, workers buried for profit, wife's death wished away by ambition. He lunged, not at Holmes, but the boy. Silence him. Holmes struck. Cane cracking Hale's wrist, sending lantern shattering, sparks danced, hum crescendoing. Lydia dragged Tommy back as walls groaned, water seeping. You engineered this madness, Holmes accused, pinning Hale. For gold. Hale laughed, broken. Gold, the deep promised power. Confessions fuel it, men's souls for mine. But it turns, demands all. Revelation hit. Hale no mastermind. Puppet to the rites he'd unearthed. The tempter was the tunnel itself, amplifying flaws. Fight it, Holmes urged, grip loosening. Confess, like the others. Hale's eyes cleared fractionally. Grace. For me? No. He twisted free, bolting into shadow. The deep takes the unrepentant. Collapse thundered. Holmes hauled Lydia and Tommy through the breach, lungs searing, stones tumbling. They burst into the main adit as it sealed, Hale's scream cut short. Above ground rain lashed the wharf. Crowe waited with Watson and Graves, faces etched worry. Holmes collapsed against a bollard, soaked, Tommy in arms. He lives, Holmes gasped. Hale, trapped. But the truth. Graves bellowed orders, men swarming, recovered one, case cracking. Watson knelt beside Holmes, concern deepening the lines around his eyes. You went alone, reckless. Holmes met his gaze, the mirror's echo fading yet lingering. Perhaps, John. But I saw myself. Crowe embraced Tommy, tears carving tracks in grime. Grace, lads, pure grace. Lydia slipped away into fog, a nod to Holmes, ally forged in depths. As medics tended the boy, Holmes straightened, resolve hardening. Hale's not gone. The deep holds more, and my war just begun. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning illuminating the tunnel mouth. Something stirred below, Hale's voice or invitation. If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. But Holmes knew, return they must. The 60 remaining souls called, and his own reflection demanded facing. Dusk's mercy was fleeting. Midnight's trial awaited. Rain hammered the cobblestones of Baker Street as the hansom cab rattled to a stop outside 221B. Holmes descended stiffly, his Inverness cape dripping like a shroud. Tommy Crowe clutched protectively in his arms. The boy stirred faintly, murmuring through fevered dreams, his small chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Watson leaped down next, umbrella forgotten, his face a mask of exhaustion and unspoken fear. Elias Crowe followed, his burly frame hunched against the storm, scarred cheeks glistening with rain or tears, impossible to tell. Inside, Mrs. Hudson's gas lamps flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered sitting room. The air smelled of pipe tobacco and damp wool, the violin resting silent on its stand like a forgotten prayer. Holmes laid Tommy on the settee, wrapping him in a woolen blanket as gently as if handling fragile evidence. The child's eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes too old for his years, haunted by the deep's whisper. "You need rest, old chap," Watson murmured, pressing a hand to Holmes's forehead. "Fever's in you too. That infernal tunnel." Holmes waved him off, pacing to the window where fog pressed against the panes like breath from the grave. Rest? When 60 souls languish below, their echoes clawing at my mind. Hale's confession wasn't madness, John. It was a map. The deep feeds on unconfessed shadows, men's flaws made manifest, and tonight it showed me mine. Watson paused in pouring brandy, his moustache twitching with concern. "Yours? You've faced Moriarty's web, bartered with death itself. What shadow could rival that?" Holmes turned, his hawkish features sharpened by lamplight, eyes burning with a vulnerability rarely glimpsed. "Pride, John. The arrogance that reason conquers all. In that shattered mirror, I saw not just Hale's puppetry. I saw myself, twisting logic to evade the heart's truths. Grace isn't deduced. It's surrendered to." A knock rattled the door, urgent and sodden. Crowe admitted Inspector Graves, his portly form squeezed through the frame, rumpled suit plastered to his belly. Rain sluiced from his hat as he shook it off, eyes darting to the boy. "Word from the wharf, Holmes. Your professor's vanished clean, no body in the collapse. My lads sealed the breach, but diggers swear they heard singing from below." Crowe crossed his arms, soot still caking his nails. "Singing. Aye, like the lads before the vanishing." Hale stirred it up, unearthing old rites carved in the shale. Pagan filth from Roman times, mixed with workman's despair. But Tommy here. He confessed his Da's thieving heart, and the deep spat him back. "Grace, plain as the scars on me face." Graves snorted, though doubt creased his brow. "Superstition. We'll pump the adit tomorrow, drag it proper. You're sidelined, Holmes. Reckless dive like that. Scotland Yard's calling it quits on amateurs." Holmes's lip curled, but fatigue dulled the retort. "Amateur. Your quick closures bury truths, Inspector." Hale spoke of power from confessions, fuel for something ancient, ravenous. The tunnel's veins pulse with it, drawing the unrepentant deeper. And now it hungers anew. Tommy whimpered, stirring under the blanket. His small hand clutched Holmes's sleeve. "Mister." "The man in the water." He said sorry, but the shadows wouldn't let go. "You gotta tell him like Da did afore he went under." Crowe knelt, voice gravelly with emotion. "Your Da confessed his greed, lad, stealing wages to feed us. The deep took him, but maybe it weighs the heart. Elias Crowe ain't running no more. I'll go back with you, Mr. Holmes. For me, mates." Watson watched the exchange, his soldier's heart stirring. "Faith in the impossible, Holmes. You've always mocked it, yet here we stand, saved by a widow's nerve and a foreman's grit." Lydia Thorne. She slipped off like smoke, but her nod promised more. "Indeed," Holmes replied softly, staring into the fire's glow. "An ally forged in peril. Her revenge against Hale's betrayal mirrors our own quest. But John, the cost. My mind fractures under this. Logic falters where souls scream. Silence fell, broken only by the hearth's crackle and rain's relentless tattoo. Graves shifted uncomfortably, then sighed. "Fine. Midnight briefing at the wharf. But no lone wolf stunts, Detective. We're in this mire together." As the inspector lumbered out, Holmes sank into his armchair, fingers steepled but trembling faintly. Watson poured tea, strong and black, pressing the cup into his friend's hands. Drink, then sleep. The deep waits for no man. Sleep evaded Holmes. In the small hours, he rose, slipping to his chemical table, where syringes gleamed temptingly in the moonlight filtering through curtains. The 7% solution whispered promises of clarity, escape from the mirror's accusatory gaze. His hand hovered, veins mapping old paths of indulgence. Pride had driven him to isolation before, now it tempted surrender. "No," he whispered to the shadows, "not tonight. Grace demands sobriety of spirit." Dawn crept grey over London, fog coiling like serpents from the Thames. Baker Street stirred with purpose. Crowe arrived with provisions, lanterns, ropes, a battered Bible clutched underarm. Tommy, bandaged and brighter-eyed, insisted on a blessing, his child's voice steady. "For the lost ones, Mr. Holmes. Tell him there's a way out." Holmes nodded, the gesture heavy with uncharted humility. "Very well, young Crowe, words first, then action." Watson strapped on his service revolver, moustache firm. "To the Rotherhithe tunnel mouth, then. Graves' men await." The group cabbed south through sodden streets, gas lamps hissing farewell as electric trams hummed ominously. At the wharf, workers milled under tarps, faces gaunt from night watches. Lydia Thorne emerged from the mist, raven hair pinned severely, velvet gown traded for sturdy boots and cloak. Her pale cheeks flushed with resolve. "Professor Hale trapped you below," she said without preamble, eyes locking on Holmes. "But his ledgers, I found. Shipments of quicksilver and bone dust fed into the walls for rituals. He sought immortality through the digger's despair. My late husband's lover, that snake. We end it together. Graves barked orders, pumps groaning to life, spewing brackish water. Breaches holding, but echoes persist. Your lead, Holmes. But one wrong step." Holmes descended first, lantern cutting the gloom, the air thick with mildew and something sweeter, like overripe fruit laced with copper. Steps echoed hollowly, the adit sloping into earth's maw. Crowe followed, Bible open, murmuring psalms that bounced off dripping walls. Lydia and Watson close, Tommy safe above with medics. Deeper, the hum returned, low, insistent, vibrating in bones. Holmes paused at a side shaft, shale glittering unnaturally. Fresh carvings, twisted faces, mouths agape in silent screams. "Hale's work," Lydia breathed, tracing one. "Invocations for the deep to rise." A rumble shook dust free. Watson steadied a beam, unstable. "We press or retreat?" Holmes's gaze hardened, inner war etching lines deeper. "Press. The 60 call. And I must face the reflection entire." They advanced, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Faint cries echoed ahead, not wind but voices, layered in agony and plea. Confessions. Crowe wondered aloud, or trap? Suddenly a figure lurched from shadow, gaunt, eyes wild, clothes rotted to rags. One of the vanished, stumbling forth. "Help! Confessed me sins." But it wants more. The mirror shows no end. Holmes caught him as he collapsed, pulse faint. Elias water, Lydia. Bind wounds. The man gasped, fingers clawing Holmes's coat. Hale. Lives. Deep remade him. "Come for you, prideful one." Terror flickered in Holmes's eyes, quickly quelled. "Then we meet him on his ground. John, mark the path." The trial deepens. As they pressed on, the hum swelled to a chorus, walls weeping black ichor. Holmes felt the pull, his own unspoken regrets surfacing like bile. Midnight's trial was no metaphor, the deep burrowed inward, demanding surrender. But Grace, glimpsed in Tommy's survival, urged defiance. Behind, the shaft groaned ominously. Something massive stirred, Hale's laughter threading the din. The unrepentant led the way. The gaunt man's words hung in the fetid air, like a curse half-spoken, his chest heaving as if the very breath he drew was borrowed from the depths. Holmes knelt beside him, fingers probing the ragged wounds that wept not blood, but a viscous ooze, dark as ink and smelling of salt and decay. Elias Crowe clutched his Bible tighter, the leather creaking under scarred knuckles, while Lydia Thorne knelt opposite, her velvet skirts pooling in the muck as she tore strips from her shawl to bind the man's gashes. Watson stood guard, revolver drawn, eyes scanning the quivering shadows where the tunnel forked into oblivion. "He lives below," the survivor rasped again, eyes rolling white. "Hale. Fused with it. The deep forgives no half measures. Confess or join the 60. Holmes's mind raced, cataloguing symptoms. Delirium from exposure, perhaps hallucinatory fever, yet the precision of his ravings rang too true. Prideful one. The phrase burrowed like a splinter, echoing Holmes's own unspoken vanities. The cases solved through intellect alone, lives dissected like specimens on a slide. For the first time, logic faltered against this subterranean gospel of reckoning. "Rest now," Holmes murmured, easing the man back against the shale. "Your testimony guides us. John, administer morphine. Elias, your psalms. Keep the darkness at bay." Crowe nodded, voice gravelly with years of coal dust and grief. "Psalm 23 then. The Lord is my shepherd, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." The words reverberated, frail against the swelling hum that pulsed from the earth like a colossal heart. They left the survivor in a niche, lanterns dimmed to preserve oil, proceeding single file into the narrower adit. The walls closed in, pressing shoulders, the air growing warmer, unnaturally so, laced with that cloying sweetness, now mingled with brimstone. Watson's boots splashed through shallow pools that hadn't drained properly, each step sending ripples that distorted their reflections, faces elongated, eyes hollowed into accusing stares. Lydia walked closest to Holmes, her breath quickening. Those carvings back there. Hale etched them during the night shifts, said they were old engineering marks, but I saw him whisper to them, promises for power, for the tunnel to yield gold veins instead of mud. Holmes glanced at her, hawkish profile sharp in the lantern glow. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to." Her voice cracked, raven hair clinging damp to pale cheeks. "The men trusted him. Loved one. Tommy's father. Hale promised safety. Lies. All of it." The admission stirred something in Holmes, a flicker of empathy amid the calculation. Love blinds as surely as pride. Yet here you stand, aiding the truth. A tremor shook the passage, loose stones pattering like hail. They froze as a distant roar built, not water this time but a grinding, as if stone teeth gnashed. Crowe halted, Bible raised like a shield. "It's coming. The thing they woke." "Press on," Holmes commanded, though his own pulse thrummed with unaccustomed dread. The 60 demanded. Deeper still, the tunnel widened into a cavernous chamber. The Thames Tunnel's forgotten heart, a vast hollow where the original bore had collapsed decades prior, now shored by hasty timbers bowed under pressure. Lanterns revealed horror, skeletal remains tangled in rusted picks and carts, not the clean white of bone but mottled black as if charred from within. 61 by hasty count. Wait, no, markers etched into the wall tallied precisely. Shannon 2 entered, 41 fled, 61 claimed. Watson swallowed bile. Good God. What madness did this? Not madness, Holmes whispered, kneeling by a corpse whose face was frozen in rictus ecstasy, mouth stretched impossibly wide. Ritual. They confessed here, voluntarily. Lydia gasped, pointing to a central pit 20 feet across, ringed by mirrors, salvaged from above, cracked but reflective, angled to converge on the abyss. In their surfaces danced faint images, flashes of lives, drunken brawls, stolen wages, betrayed wives, like projections from a phantasmagoscope. Hale's design? To force truth upon the diggers, promising absolution if they surrendered to the deep. Crowe crossed himself, muttering, "Idolatry. Man playing God with mirrors and mud." A chuckle slithered from the pit, low and wet. Victor Hale's voice transformed, echoing from multiple throats at once. "Sherlock Holmes, the rationalist, descends. How fares your reason now?" Holmes rose slowly, lantern held high. The light pierced the murk, illuminating a shape coiling at the pit's lip. Hale, or what remained. His frame elongated unnaturally, skin fused with glistening tendrils of tunnel ooze, eyes milky orbs reflecting infinite tunnels within tunnels. Bespectacles gone, tailored suit shredded, he perched like a spider, limbs multiplied into clawing appendages. "Professor," Holmes said evenly, though his deerstalker shadowed a jaw clenched tight. "Your experiment ends. Emerge, face justice." "Justice?" Hale's laughter bubbled, ichor dripping from lipless mouth. "The deep is justice. It stripped me bare. Debts, bribes, the widow's favors sold for secrets. I confessed fully. It remade me guardian. You, your sins whisper. The cocaine vial hidden in Baker Street, the cases where mercy was discarded for proof. Confess, Holmes. Join the chorus." The mirrors flared, Holmes' reflection warping, visions assaulting, Moriarty's fall, Watson's wounds ignored in pursuit of clue. Irene Adler glimpsed as puzzle, not woman. Pride swelled in his chest, hot shame twisting inward. He staggered, pipe forgotten in pocket, the hum sinking to his heartbeat. Watson lunged forward, revolver barking, crack echoing, bullet splashing harmlessly into the pit. "Elias, help him!" Crowe charged, Bible thrust like spear. "In the name of the Father," Hale's tendril whipped, sending Crowe sprawling into mirrors that shattered like brittle ice. Lydia screamed, dragging the foreman back, shards slicing her palms. Holmes fought the visions, will iron against the tide. No. Logic. Faith in evidence. But evidence failed, the deep pulled, promising clarity beyond intellect. Grace, he thought wildly, Tommy's innocent eyes above. Watson's steadfast loyalty, a counterpull human and divine. Hale reared, pit churning below with muffled pleas. "Come, detective, the 60 sing your name." Holmes drew his own revolver, steadying aim. "Your God devours its prophets. Yield." A massive quake erupted, timbers cracking overhead. The chamber buckled, mirrors cascading into the pit like offerings. Watson hauled Holmes back as the floor tilted, Hale's form sliding toward the edge, screeching defiance. Not yet. The unconfessed arrive. They retreated amid falling rock, lanterns swinging wild. Crowe limped, ribs bruised, Lydia bleeding but fierce. Above, Tommy's cries echoed faintly from rescuers. "Hold on." Surfacing, gasping into night air, fog cloaking whopping docks. Holmes collapsed against crates, the weight of glimpsed abyss crushing. Hale lived transformed guardian of forced truths, but Holmes's own mirror cracked, reason alone insufficient against the soul's depths. Graves awaited with constables, lantern-jawed. "Report." "Deeper evil than imagined," Holmes rasped, mind reeling. Hale orchestrates from below. "We return at dawn, armed with more than bullets." As stars pierced fog, a new hum lingered in Holmes's ears. Not the deeps, but resolve forged in fire. Yet doubt gnawed. Could he confess what reason buried before the tunnel claimed all? Far below, Hale's chorus swelled, awaiting the rationalist's fall. Dawn broke over the fog-choked Thames like a reluctant witness, its pale light filtering through the grime-streaked windows of Baker Street lodgings. Sherlock Holmes paced the worn Persian rug, his Inverness cape discarded over a chair, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. The air hung heavy with the scent of strong tea and Watson's pipe smoke, a futile attempt to banish the subterranean reek that clung to their clothes. Damp earth, rust, and something fouler, like forgotten confessions bubbling up from the sewer depths. Watson sat by the fire, revolver cleaned and loaded on the table beside a half-eaten plate of kippers. His moustache twitched as he watched Holmes, the doctor's eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. Elias Crowe slumped in the armchair, bandaged ribs heaving with each breath, a tumbler of brandy untouched in his meaty fist. Lydia Thorne perched on the settee, her raven hair disheveled, palms wrapped in fresh linen that already spotted crimson. Inspector Harlan Graves had stormed off hours earlier, muttering about warrants and madmen, but his parting shot lingered. "Holmes, this occult nonsense ends at first light, or I bury the case." Holmes stopped pacing, hawk-nosed profile sharp against the gaslight. Hale survives below, transformed. Not by science nor mere delusion. The pit. It feeds on unvoiced sins. 61 souls, their echoes binding him. We arm not just with steel, but truths unearthed. Crowe grunted, scarred face twisting. Truths? Like me leaving the lads to that black moor? Bible burned my hand last night, Mr. Holmes. God's wrath, or mine own guilt? Lydia leaned forward, velvet gown whispering against the upholstery. Guilt is the chain, Elias. Hale whispered promises to me once, in the shadows of the docks. Riches from the dig, buried relics from Roman times. But he took more. My brother's life. Traded for silence. Cut those chains, or join the chorus. Watson cleared his throat, sturdy frame shifting. Holmes. Graves won't wait. He's rallying constables for a full seal-off. And Tommy. The boy's fever worsens. Asks for his da, one of the vanished. Holmes's grey eyes flickered, a rare crack in the facade. Thomas Hale's son, the professor's own blood, innocent anchor. Fetch the lad's drawings, Watson, every scribble from the tunnel mouth. As Watson rummaged through satchels, Holmes unrolled a blueprint of the Thames Tunnel, its labyrinthine passages snaking beneath the river like veins in a dying beast. Built in 1843 by Brunel, now a rotting artery for sewage and smugglers. The chamber they fled, unmapped, whispered of in diggers' tales as the Devil's Vestibule. Mirrors there, Hale said, reflecting the unconfessed. Plant seeds early, Holmes thought, mind racing. The foreman's tremor last night, Lydia's averted gaze. Red herrings or keys? A knock rattled the door. Mrs. Hudson entered with a tray, her plump face creased with worry. Gentlemen, word from Wapping. Fishermen pulled up bones at low tide. Human, fresh-marked. And that hum. Carries on the water now. Holmes snatched a femur sketch from the local rag, magnifying glass sweeping over tool gouges. Not fresh. Ritual scoring pre-Victorian. Hale's cult or older? Crowe drained his brandy at last. I heard it first, digging deep. Chanting in tongues, not English. Promised wealth if we confessed secrets to the pit. I confessed nothing. Ran. 41 of us surfaced, liars all. Lydia's pale cheeks flushed. And the 61. They spilled. Debts, affairs, murders hushed. Hale led the right. Tendrils rising like judgment. Watson returned with Tommy's drawings. Childish lines of men marching into a mouth, mirrors shattering light. One figure crowned, arms wide. Father, Holmes murmured. Resolve hardened. We descend prepared. Watson, your medical kit, sedatives for hysteria. Crowe, your pickaxe, blessed if you must. Lydia, your knowledge of Hale's lairs. Graves be damned. We end this before the river claims the tunnel entire. By mid-morning they gathered at Wapping docks, the Thames slapping lazily against rotting piers, gulls wheeling in the chill mist. Graves barred the entrance with constables, portly frame puffed in rumpled suit. No entry, Holmes. My men report gas leaks, cave-ins, official business. Holmes stepped forward, deerstalker shadowing his eyes. Inspector, your seals delay justice. Hale orchestrates murders from the depths. Listen, the hum grows. A low vibration thrummed through the cobbles, faint but insistent, sinking with heartbeats. Constables shifted uneasily, one crossing himself. Graves snorted. Imagination. Stand down. Lydia slipped forward, voice honeyed. Inspector. A word? Hale courted me. Secrets he shared. Help us, and glory's yours. While she distracted, Crowe shouldered past, pickaxe glinting. Holmes and Watson followed into the tunnel mouth, gas lamps flickering to life. The air turned fetid, water dripping like tears from arched brick vaults. Deeper they pressed, boots splashing fetid pools, the hum swelling to a murmur of voices, names, pleas, accusations. Holmes's logic strained, reason catalogued echoes, yet the pull tugged at buried regrets. Moriarty's shadow, Irene's ghost, Watson's unwavering faith tested by his detachment. They reached the fractured chamber, mirrors reduced to glittering debris around the pit. No Hale, but fresh chalk runes circled the edge. Confess or join? Crowe froze, pickaxe trembling. My lads screaming. Watson shone his lantern down, bottomless dark, but ripples stirred, tendrils questing upward. Holmes knelt, revolver ready. Hale, show yourself! Silence. Then laughter bubbling from the depths, Hale's voice warped. "Detective, you return. Confess your hubris, reason's blindfold on the soul's eye." Lydia whispered. "He's baiting." The side passage, his escape. They veered into a narrow vein, walls slick with phosphorescent slime. Air thick as opium haze, visions assailed. Holmes glimpsed Watson dying in Afghanistan, himself unraveling cocaine vials in despair. Crowe saw mates crushed, unavenged. Lydia, her brother's betrayed eyes. Watson gasped, clutching his side. Hallucinations, or truths? "Push through," Holmes urged, mind clawing back deduction. The slime, organic bioluminescent fungi amplified by gas. Hale manipulates, but chemistry explains. A collapse roared behind, sealing retreat. Trapped. Ahead, Hale's lair, a cavern aglow with stolen lanterns, mirrors intact, workers' tools twisted into altars. The professor stood transformed, skin pallid-veined blue, eyes pits of ink. 60? He crooned. Now 62. Elias, the coward, returns. Lydia, my betrayer. Crowe charged, pickaxe swinging. "For the lads!" Hale's tendril lashed, coiling Crowe's leg, dragging him toward a sub-pit. "Bible forgotten," the foreman confessed in screams. "I knew the support's weak. Saved meself." Truth freed the tendril momentarily, but Hale laughed. More fuel. Holmes fired, bullet grazing, eliciting a hiss. Watson lunged with syringe, sedative piercing flesh. Hale reeled, but summoned spectral echoes, ghostly diggers clawing at them. Lydia shattered a mirror, shards flying. "See your own lies." Chaos reigned, punches landing, visions swirling. Holmes pinned Hale, logic fracturing. "What are you?" "The Deep's confessor," Hale gasped, eyes rolling. "River's god, ancient before Brunel. Feeds on secrets, birth's guardians. Join. Or confess publicly, shame your name." Holmes hesitated, revolver cold against temple. Public confession? Baker Street's genius undone? Watson hauled him back as Hale slithered into shadow. "Not here!" They fled another collapse, emerging, gasping into daylight, Graves' men staring. Crowe wept openly, unburdened yet broken. Lydia bandaged wounds, fierce now ally. Back at Baker Street, Holmes stared into fire, pipe unlit. Confession. The key. But whose? Comment who you suspect. Can you solve it first? Night fell, the hum invading dreams. Tommy worsened. Hale's note arrived. Bring the boy at midnight, or the 63 claim him. Holmes' reason teetered. Dawn's plan shattered. A child's life the final test. What price truth now? Dawn crept over Baker Street like a reluctant confessor, its pale light filtering through the heavy drapes of 221B, casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Sherlock Holmes sat motionless in his armchair, the unlit pipe still clenched between his teeth, his hawkish features etched deeper by the night's unrelenting siege. The note from Hale lay crumpled on the mantel, its ink smeared as if the words themselves bled accusation. Bring the boy at midnight, or the 63 claim him. Tommy, the orphaned digger's lad, no more than 10, lay feverish upstairs, his small chest heaving with the same subterranean hum that now pulsed in Holmes' veins, a rhythm not of lungs, but of something older, hungrier. Watson entered quietly, his sturdy frame filling the doorway, mustache twitching with unspoken worry. He carried a tray of tea and toast, the steam rising like faint prayers in the chill air. "Holmes," he said softly, placing it down, "you haven't moved since we returned. The sedative we dosed Hale with, it bought time, but not enough. Graves has men watching the tunnel entrances, but this demands more than constables." Holmes's eyes flicked to the note, then away, toward the window where fog clung to the glass like unspoken sins. "Reason fractures under pressure, Watson," he murmured, his voice a dry rasp. Hale spoke of confession as the key, public shame to sate the deep. But whose shame? Mine? The professor's empire crumbles on lies of structural integrity, yet he serves something vaster. 62 souls, he claimed, but the records say 61 missing. The discrepancy gnaws. Watson poured the tea, the liquid's dark swirl mirroring Holmes's turmoil. Elias Crowe unburdened his cowardice in that cavern, admitting he fled the collapse, leaving mates to the slime. It weakened Hale momentarily, as if truth starved the beast. Lydia's mirror-shattering cry exposed reflections of deceit. Perhaps confession is the weapon, not lead or steel. A floorboard creaked upstairs, followed by a child's muffled sob. Holmes rose abruptly, his Inverness cape swirling like a shroud. The boy, Tommy, clutches a locket from his father, a digger swallowed by the tunnel. Inside, a faded prayer card. Forgive us our trespasses. Faith's folly, yet it anchors him where logic falters. They ascended to the bedroom, where gaslight flickered over the narrow bed. Tommy's face, pale and slick with sweat, twisted in delirium. "Da." The river whispers. He whimpered, fingers twisting the locket. Faces in the water. They want stories. Bad ones. Holmes knelt, his lean form folding with uncharacteristic gentleness, placing a cool cloth on the boy's brow. "What stories, lad? Speak them." The detective's mind raced, hallucinations induced by spores, or echoes of the lost. Tommy's eyes fluttered open, pupils dilated black. The professor promised gold for silence. Dar confessed he skimmed timber, weakened beams for drink money. Hale knew, fed it to the deep. Now it hungers for more. "For you, mister. Secrets make it grow." Watson exchanged a grave look with Holmes. The foreman lied partially, his cowardice masked deeper guilt. A chain of confessions, each feeding the entity's power. By noon they convened in the parlor. Elias Crowe, bandaged and hollow-eyed, Lydia Thorne, veiled in somber velvet, her raven hair unbound, and Inspector Graves, portly and perspiring, slamming a fist on the table. "This occult rot ends today," Graves growled. "My men seal the tunnel at dusk. Hale's a madman, not a god." Crowe shifted, scars pulling tight on his burly face. "No, Governor, I felt it. The deep. It don't care for law, needs truth spilled like blood. I confessed me running, and it recoiled. But me mates' sins, theft, grudges, abandonments, they bloated it." Lydia leaned forward, her voice a silken thread laced with venom. "Victor Hale seduced me with promises of security after my husband died in his employ. Another accident. I spied for him until I saw the mirrors, portals to drown guilt in reflections. Shatter them all, and perhaps the beast starves." Holmes paced, deerstalker shadowing his intense gaze. Logic demands pattern. 102 entered, 41 emerged. 61 unaccounted, yet Hale claims 62 absorbed. Guardians now. The extra, the boy? No, the discrepancy is Hale himself, transfigured starter of the cycle. Confession propagates it. Absolution disrupts. Graves snorted. "Poppycock, we'll dynamite the lair." "And birth a flood on London," Holmes snapped, rare anger flaring. "No, we go at midnight as summoned. Armed not with guns but truths. Each of us carries wreckage, mine, the detachment that blinded me to human cost." Watson nodded, pipe smoke curling like resolve. "Then we face it together. Community against the abyss." As evening fell, the group descended to the Thames fog-shrouded docks, the river's lap a mocking lullaby. The tunnel mouth yawned black, gas lamps sputtering in damp wind. Tommy, stabilized by laudanum, remained under Mrs. Hudson's care, Holmes's safeguard. They plunged into the depths, lanterns casting jittery pools on slime-veined walls. The hum intensified, vibrations rattling teeth. Crowe led, pickaxe ready, muttering prayers half-remembered from childhood. Lydia clutched a satchel of mirror shards, her steps measured, transformed from suspect to sentinel. Deeper, the air thickened, bioluminescent fungi pulsing like veins. Echoes whispered names, betrayals, thefts, loves forsaken. Holmes's mind assaulted, visions of overlooked cases, clients driven to despair by his cold precision. "Feel it, detective," Hale's voice slithered from shadows. "Your genius confesses isolation. Admit it publicly. Baker Street's sham." Watson gripped his revolver, mustache beaded with sweat. "Steady, Holmes. It's manipulation. A chamber opened, Hale's lair transformed, mirrors reformed into a cathedral of deceit, reflections multiplying sins. The professor emerged, pallid flesh rippling with tendrils, eyes abyssal. "You bring offerings?" he crooned, voice echoing legion. Crowe stepped first, voice booming. "I confess, skimmed wages, drank mate's pay, fled when timbers cracked. Punish me." Tendrils lashed, but recoiled as truth landed, Hale shrieking. Lies bind, truth severs. Lydia hurled shards, one piercing a mirror. "I confess loving power over loyalty, spied, seduced for secrets. No more." Fractures spiderwebbed, the entities glowed dimming. Graves bellowed his own, buried evidence for promotions, ignored cries for safety. Holmes faced the core, revolver steady, but words first. "I confess hubris, reason as God, humanity dismissed. Failed you all by detachment." Hale lunged, tendrils coiling Holmes's throat. "Join the 63, Watson fired, syringe at ready. Not him." Chaos erupted, pickaxes swinging, mirrors shattering in cascades, truths poured, each confession a blade, the deep convulsing, guardian's wails fading. Hale writhed, form destabilizing, blue veins bursting luminescent sap. One final lunge pinned Holmes against slime wall. Public shame or oblivion. Holmes gasped, pipe tumbling. "Truth costs all." "I confess." Faith in logic alone was my sin. The entity howled, Hale's body collapsing inward, sucked to the depths. Mirrors imploded, darkness surging, then receding. They staggered out as dynamite blasts, Graves' men, sealed the tunnel forever. Dawn broke clear, fog lifting. Back at Baker Street, Holmes lit his pipe at last, smoke wreathing a faint smile. Redemption not in solving, but sharing the burden. Yet Tommy's locket hummed faintly on the table. Had they slain the beast or merely starved it? A new whisper hinted more tunnels lingered beneath London. Secrets unborn. The fog of the previous night clung to Baker Street like a reluctant ghost, but morning light pierced the heavy drapes of 221B, casting long shadows across the cluttered sitting room. Sherlock Holmes sat motionless in his armchair, the meerschaum pipe clenched between his teeth, its bowl cold and unlit. His hawkish features, sharpened by exhaustion, stared at the small silver locket on the mantelpiece. Tommy's locket. The boy-digger, no more than 18 when he vanished into the Thames Tunnel's moor, had clutched it fiercely in the faded photograph inside, a mother's gift, engraved with a simple cross. Now it hummed faintly, a vibration Holmes felt in his bones rather than heard, like the distant thrum of the underground trains far below. Dr. John Watson paced the Persian rug, his sturdy frame tense, moustache twitching with unspoken worry. The revolver still weighed heavy in his coat pocket, a reminder of the syringe-fired chaos in the tunnel's depths. Graves had sealed the entrance with enough dynamite to bury secrets for centuries, and Elias Crowe had stumbled back to his dockside hovel, muttering prayers to saints long forgotten. Lydia Thorne had vanished into the gaslit alleys, her raven hair a fleeting shadow. Yet here, in the sanctuary of these walls, peace eluded them. Holmes's confession echoed in Watson's mind. Hubris, detachment, logic as a false idol. For a man who dissected the world like a cadaver, admitting such frailty felt like surrender. A knock shattered the quiet, sharp, insistent. Mrs. Hudson's voice filtered through the door, laced with her usual brisk concern. "The inspector is here again, Mr. Holmes, and he's brought company." Harlan Graves lumbered in, his portly figure disheveled, rumpled suit stained with tunnel grime he hadn't bothered to brush away. Behind him shuffled a gaunt man in fisherman's oilskins, eyes hollowed by grief. "This is Samuel Finch," Graves grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Father of one of the 61, Tommy Finch's da. Says he felt something last night, a pull from the river." Holmes's gaze flicked to the locket, then to Finch. The man trembled, hands raw from hauling nets along the fog-choked docks of Wapping. "Speak, Mr. Finch." The vibration ceased as Holmes lifted the locket, but Finch recoiled as if burned. "It started after your lot blew the tunnel shut. River ran blacker than ink, sir. Fish bellies up, bloated with bones not theirs. And my Tommy's voice, whispering in the current. "Come fetch me, Dar, the deep ain't done." Watson's hand instinctively went to his pocket. Superstition, surely. But Holmes leaned forward, his voice a scalpel's edge. "Describe the bones precisely. Size, markings?" Finch swallowed hard. "Human finger bones, sir, knuckled like a child's, and etched, tiny crosses, like on Tommy's locket." The room grew colder, the fire in the grate sputtering as if starved. Holmes examined the locket under his magnifying glass, the cross gleaming unnaturally. Hale's entity, the deep, as Crowe called it, fed on deceit, confessions severing its tendrils. They had starved it, watched Professor Hale's form implode into luminescent sap, yet remnants lingered, drawn to unresolved sins like moths to flame. Holmes felt it now, a gnawing in his chest. His own confession had been partial, logic's throne cracked but not toppled. Faith. What form did it take for a rationalist? "We return to the river," Holmes declared, rising with predatory grace. "Watson, fetch the lantern and morphine kit. Graves, your men cordon the docks. Finch, you guide us to the exact spot." Graves balked, face reddening. "Mad, Holmes. That pit's collapsed. My superiors want this buried. 102 entered, 41 out official. No more scandals." Holmes fixed him with those piercing grey eyes. "Official lies birth monsters, Inspector. Your buried evidence fed it once. Will you confess fully now or let it claim more?" Graves deflated, nodding curtly. "For the record, then. But if we're wrong." Night fell heavy over the Thames, gas lamps flickering like dying stars along the Rotherhithe shore. The air reeked of brine and rot, the river slapping hungrily against pilings. Crowe awaited them at the blasted tunnel mouth, now a jagged scar of rubble and twisted iron, his burly frame silhouetted against the black water. Lydia emerged from shadows too, velvet gown muddied, her pale face resolute. I couldn't stay away. The whispers followed me home. They descended makeshift ropes into the flooded lower galleries, boots sucking in mud laced with bioluminescent veins, remnants pulsing faintly. The locket led them, humming louder near a submerged alcove, where bones protruded like accusing fingers. Holmes knelt, pipe finally lit, its cherry glow illuminating etched crosses matching Tommy's. A ripple stirred the water, tendrils coiling upward, not Hale's corporeal horror, but subtler, vaporous. Voices echoed. "Unfinished business." Crowe gripped his pickaxe, voice gravelly. "I ran once. Won't again, I confess. I hoarded supplies, let lads die for my fear." The tendrils lashed weakly, recoiling as truth burned. Lydia stepped forward, raven hair plastered wet. "I used men like tools, betrayed loves for vengeance." No more shadows. One by one they faced it. Graves admitted fabricating reports for glory. Watson, his envy of Holmes' genius masking deeper loyalty doubts. Finch wept, confessing neglect, working nights, leaving Tommy to the digs alone. Holmes stood last, water lapping his calves, the entity's core manifesting as a swirling vortex of eyes and mouths. "You severed Hale," it hissed in legion voices, "but the deep is the Thames itself, eternal, hungry for pride." Holmes extinguished his pipe, plunging them into lantern light only. Pride in intellect blinded me to grace, the unprovable force binding flawed souls. I confess, clinging to reason as armor, denying the divine spark in every man, even you. The vortex shrieked, collapsing into foam, bones sinking harmlessly. Silence fell, profound as prayer. They climbed out as dawn gilded the spires of London, the river running clear once more. Back at Baker Street, Holmes placed the locket in Finch's hands. "Tell his mother it's over, truth freed him." Finch nodded, tears carving paths in grime. "Thank you, sir, for believing when I couldn't." Watson watched Holmes slump into his chair, utterly spent. "You've changed, old friend, that confession." Holmes smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Change is the cost of truth, Watson. Logic maps the path, faith walks it." Yet as Finch departed, a faint ripple echoed from the hearth, or was it the pipes? Crowe lingered at the door, scarred face thoughtful. "More tunnels snake under the city, Mr. Holmes. Old Roman ones forgotten, if it stirs again." Holmes nodded, the weight of restoration settling like a mantle. Then we stand ready, not alone. Days blurred into a fragile normalcy. Holmes chronicled the case in ciphered notes, sharing fragments with Watson over brandy. Lydia visited once, her alliance forged in fire. She spoke of starting anew, perhaps a quiet life beyond the docks. Graves, humbled, sent reports crediting Holmes anonymously. 41 survivors, 61 presumed drowned in a collapse. No mention of the deep. But Holmes's inner world shifted irrevocably. Sleepless nights brought visions not of clues but faces. The lost diggers, Tommy's innocent eyes. He attended a riverside chapel one foggy morning, not for sermons, but silence. There, amid the scent of incense and damp wool, he felt the hum fade entirely, grace unearned, washing clean the hubris. Crowe rebuilt his life, rallying survivors into a guild advocating safer digs. Finch reunited with his wife, the locket buried in hallowed ground. Even Graves mellowed, inviting Holmes to Scotland Yard for tea, awkward but genuine. Watson penned letters to Mary's memory, finding peace in purpose. Holmes, ever the enigma, resumed violin at dawn, melodies softer, laced with hope. Yet London pulsed beneath them, veins of forgotten depths. A newspaper clipping arrived anonymously, unexplained vanishings in the Blackwall Tunnel construction. Holmes folded it away, pipe smoke curling, the struggle eternal, but so the light. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, Holmes turned to Watson. "The deep taught me redemption isn't solitary, it binds us, flaws and all." Watson raised his glass. "To the journey, then." Outside thunder rolled, but the locket on the mantel lay still. For now. Rain hammered the grimy panes of Baker Street lodgings like accusatory fingers, blurring the gas lamps into hazy orbs below. Sherlock Holmes sat motionless in his armchair, the anonymous clipping from the Evening Post unfurled across his knee. Blackwall Tunnel, another subterranean vein piercing London's underbelly. Fresh reports of unexplained vanishings among the navvies. 6 men unaccounted for after a routine shift. Echoes of shouts swallowed by the earth. The parallels gnawed at him, not as coincidence but as a summons. He folded the paper with deliberate creases, his hawk-nosed profile etched sharp against the firelight. Logic dictated rest. The Thames case closed, survivors scattered to fragile rebuilds. Yet the violin lay silent on its stand, strings humming faintly as if in protest. Faith, he mused inwardly, that elusive variable, unquantifiable, yet insistent. It had reshaped him since the deep's retreat, stripping away the certainty of pure deduction. Now this, a final test perhaps to prove redemption's endurance. Watson stirred from his own chair, pipe smoke wreathing his mustache like a veil. "Not again, Holmes," he said softly, reading the silence better than words. "You've given enough. Let Graves handle the yard's drudgery." Holmes's eyes, steel grey and unyielding, met his friend's. "The deep does not yield to bureaucracy, John. It hungers on unfinished echoes." Crowe warned of Roman tunnels linking the old veins, forgotten passages where it might stir anew. "We owe the vanished more than case files." Watson sighed, the weight of shared scars pressing his shoulders. Elias Crowe had become their unlikely anchor, the burly foreman forging a guild from the Thames survivors. But 41 souls saved did not erase 61 lost. And you, Holmes, your nights grow thinner. Mary would chide me for letting you chase shadows alone. A knock rattled the door, heavy and sodden. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Crowe, his scarred face glistening under a sopping wool cap, soot-streaked coat shedding Thames mud. "Evening, gents," he rumbled, voice gravel from years underground. "Saw the clipping in me pub. Blackwall lads, same blank stares on the families. Like ours before you pulled us back." Holmes rose, Inverness cape swirling. "Your instincts serve, Elias. The locket lies dormant, yet ripples persist." Lydia sent word too. Doc whispers of a figure matching Hale's ghost, haunting the new sites. Crowe's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. Professor Victor Hale, that shifty-eyed viper, undone by his own greed in the Thames collapse. Thought him buried with the damned. Lydia Thorne's no saint herself, raven-haired widow with revenge in her veins, but she's straight now, our eyes in the fog. Watson fetched brandy, the amber liquid catching firelight. Then we go at dawn. But Holmes, promise me, this ends it. No more descending alone. Dawn broke pallid over Wapping docks, fog coiling like spectral ropes from the Thames. The trio boarded a wherry, oars slicing black water toward Blackwall. Holmes's mind raced, cataloguing anomalies, the clipping's precise coordinates, aligning with Victorian sewer maps he'd memorized. Beneath lay Roman aqueducts, silt-choked relics predating Brunel's tunnel. The deep, that primordial hum, not hallucination but entity, fed on isolation, amplifying despair until men turned on themselves or vanished into cracks. At Blackwall's mouth, gas flares sputtered against dripping arches, illuminating navvies with hollow cheeks and darting eyes. Inspector Harlan Graves lumbered forward, portly frame squeezed into a rumpled greatcoat, his rivalry softened to grudging alliance. "Mr. Holmes," he grunted. "Didn't expect you. My men found tools abandoned mid-shift, picks frozen mid-swing as if time stopped." Holmes knelt, gloved fingers tracing chalk marks on wet stone. "Fear etched here, Inspector, not flight. Listen." A low vibration thrummed through the soles of his boots, faint as a distant train, yet laced with that familiar malice. Crowe paled, old terrors resurfacing. "It's waking," he muttered. "Feel it in your bones." Like Thames, but hungrier. Tommy Finch spoke true. His boy's locket held it at bay once. But Hale's curse lingers. Greed opens doors. Graves scoffed lightly, but his eyes betrayed unease. Superstition. Collapses happen. Still, no bodies. Lydia emerged from the shadows, velvet gown muddied, pale face framed by raven strands. She pressed a small pouch into Holmes's palm, Hale's signet ring, dredged from the riverbed. "Found it last night," she whispered urgently. "He didn't die clean. Whispers say he bargained with the deep, trading lives for his legacy. Now it calls him back through others." Holmes pocketed the ring, its engraved crest cold as sin. "Motives converge," he said. "Hale's arc, from engineer to antagonist, undone by avarice. But redemption demands confrontation. We descend." Watson gripped his revolver, sturdy resolve masking inner tremor. "Not without me." The tunnel plunged them into Stygian chill, lanterns casting jittery pools on rivulets snaking the floor. Air thickened, sulphurous and cloying, pressing lungs like sodden wool. Crowe's breath rasped, flashbacks clawing, mates vanishing into fissures, screams echoing to silence. Holmes led, deerstalker shadowing his lean frame, mind a whirlwind of deduction laced with prayer. Unspoken yet fervent. Deeper, the hums swelled, words forming in the drone. "Join us." Endless rest. Voices of the 61, twisted into lure. Crowe staggered, visions assaulting, his cowardice in Thames fleeing while brothers drowned. "Can't." Again. Holmes seized his arm. "Anchor to now, Elias. Your guild stands because you chose light. Faith walks the path logic maps, but the assault intensified. Walls wept crimson rivulets, not blood, but clay illusion. Watson fired blindly at a shape, Hale's spectre, bespectacled and beckoning. "Lies," the apparition hissed. "Truth is void. Holmes, your reason fails. Embrace the deep." Holmes halted at a Roman arch, crumbled and yawning. Here. The nexus. The ring burned in his pocket. He withdrew it, hurling it into the abyss. No more bargains. Grace severs chains, not earned, but given. A roar erupted, earth quaking, stones plummeting. Lydia screamed as a fissure split, tendrils of shadow coiling. Crowe shoved her back, redemption flaring. Not today. Watson hauled Holmes from a crumbling ledge, brotherhood unbreakable. They retreated amid cave-in thunder, emerging gasping into fog-shrouded light. Graves' men sealed the mouth with dynamite blasts, echoes fading. Above, Holmes leaned on Watson, rare vulnerability cracking his facade. The deep retreats, John, but scars remain. Hale's ghost quelled, yet the struggle eternal. Crowe clasped hands, burly frame trembling with release. 41 from Thames. 6 more hinted safe in side shafts. You're doing all. Lydia's eyes softened, alliance solidified. I start clean now, perhaps teaching widows resilience. As they dispersed, Holmes gazed at the Thames, still water mirroring dawn. Inner transformation anchored, reason humbled, faith forged. Yet a faint tremor lingered underfoot, Blackwall quiet, but other veins pulsed. Whispers from Whitechapel sewers reached his ear via street Arab, more vanishings. The violin would sing tonight, not triumph, but vigilance. For the light held, but darkness probed anew. The fog clung to the Thames like a shroud that morning, thick and unyielding, muffling the cries of gulls and the distant clamour of barges. Sherlock Holmes stood at the Blackwall stairs, his Inverness cape sodden, the chill seeping into his bones despite the wool. His hawkish features, etched deeper by the night's ordeal, stared into the river's murky flow, where reflections twisted like half-formed thoughts. The ring's destruction had quelled the deep's immediate roar, but victory felt hollow, a fragile dam against an underground sea. Beside him, Dr. John Watson puffed his pipe, the tobacco's earthy scent a small comfort amid the brine and rot. Elias Crowe approached from the shadows of the tunnel mouth, now a scarred wound sealed by Graves' dynamite. The foreman's burly frame moved with a limp, his scarred face pale under the soot, eyes hollowed by visions that lingered. He carried a battered tin lantern, its flame flickering like his resolve. Holmes. The whispers. They followed me home last night. In me dreams the 61 called me back, saying I ain't earned the light. Holmes turned, his voice steady but laced with the weariness of one who had glimpsed beyond logic's edge. Dreams are the mind's forge, Elias, hammering old fears into new shapes, but you stood firm in the nexus. That choice echoes louder than any spectre. Crowe shook his head, gripping the lantern tighter, knuckles whitening. Ain't just dreams. Me wife's beside herself, says shadows moved in our rooms above the docks. And young Tommy, the lad from the guild, he vanished last eve from Whitechapel alleys. Street Arabs brought word at dawn. Watson's moustache bristled as he tamped his pipe. Whitechapel again? The Ripper's old haunts? Now this? Holmes? If the deep's tendrils spread. Holmes nodded, mind already mapping the subterranean veins beneath London, the forgotten sewers linking Thames Tunnel to the East End labyrinth. The evil retreats, John, but like black mould, it spores where neglect festers. We confront it not with pistols, but by binding the wounded. Elias, lead us to Tommy's last sighting. Redemption is communal, forged in shared steps. They set off into the fog-veiled streets, gas lamps sputtering like dying stars. Lydia Thorne joined them at the dock's edge, her raven hair pinned severely, velvet gown traded for a practical cloak. Her pale face held new steel, the widow's grief transmuted into purpose. I overheard Graves's men, more diggers muttering of cursed wages, tempted back to illicit shafts. Tommy was one, chasing coin for his sick ma, if the deep hungers anew. The group pressed into Whitechapel, where the air grew fetid with offal and despair. Narrow lanes twisted like veins, tenements leaning drunkenly, their windows blind eyes. Elias pointed to a shadowed archway near Buck's Row, where Tommy had been seen haggling with shadowy figures. Here, lad was boasting he'd found a side vein richer than Thames. Gold flecks in the clay, they said, but eyes watched him, pale ones, like Hale's ghost. Holmes knelt, deerstalker casting a long shadow, fingers tracing the grime-slick cobbles. No gold, but residue, damp clay from depths uncharted. He inhaled deeply, the metallic tang evoking the tunnel's breath. Logic posits greed as lure, yet the spectral hum we heard suggests deeper compulsion. Faith, Elias, your guild's hymn quelled it once. Sing it now. Crowe hesitated, throat working, then his gravelly baritone rose, rough but resolute. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The words hung, battling the fog's hush. Lydia joined softly, her voice a haunting counterpoint, while Watson hummed, moustache twitching with unease. A scuffle echoed from the alley's end, a cry cut short. They surged forward, Holmes leading with unerring stride. In a derelict brewhouse basement, stairs descending into gloom, they found Tommy, scrawny lad of 16, pinned by writhing shadows that coiled like smoke-made rope. His eyes bulged, mouth foaming whispers. Join. Endless rest. No! Crowe roared, lunging, lantern shattering against the tendrils. Light flared, shadows recoiling with a hiss like steam on cold iron. Holmes seized Tommy, hauling him up, while Watson's revolver barked, bullets parting the dark without harm. Lydia dashed holy water from a hidden vial, pilfered from a mission chapel, singeing the forms. The boy collapsed, gasping, clay smeared across his face. Voices. Promised forgetting. Me ma's coughin' blood, bills pilin'. But Grace, I heard it. Holmes steadied him, rare gentleness in his grip. The deep praise on despair, Tommy, weaving illusions of ease. True rest demands labor. Yours begins now. Elias, take him to your rooms. Guild watches its own. As they emerged into grey daylight, Inspector Harlan Graves lumbered up, rumpled suit askew, portly face flushed. Holmes, words spreading, sewers bubbling queer lights. Commissioner wants this buried, but I saw Hale's shade in me mirror last night. Shamed me proper. Your methods, they cut deeper than yard procedure. Holmes regarded him coolly, the shifty-eyed rivalry softened to mutual respect. Burial invites rot, Inspector. Expose the veins, seal them with lime and prayer. London's underbelly heals through vigilance, not denial. Graves nodded, humility cracking his bluster. Right. I'll rally the men. No more quick closures. Back at Baker Street lodgings that evening, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm flickers over cluttered tables strewn with maps and clay samples. Mrs. Hudson had left stew simmering, its savoury steam mingling with Watson's pipe smoke, a sanctuary amid the storm. Holmes paced, violin tucked under chin, drawing forth a melody both mournful and defiant, notes weaving through the room like threads of resolve. Watson settled into his armchair, bandaging a scraped knuckle. You've changed, old chap. The ring's fire, the hymns, they pierced your fortress of reason. Holmes paused, bow hovering, eyes distant. Reason illuminated the path, John, but grace lit the steps. The deep revealed my hubris. Logic alone starves the soul, yet together we starve it instead. Lydia arrived unannounced, bearing a small ledger from Hale's effects, accounts of bribed officials, vanished men tallied as accidents. This proves it. His greed cracked the earth, inviting the abyss. But destroying it severs the chain. For me too, no more shadows of betrayal. Crowe followed, Tommy in tow, the boy wide-eyed at the detective's sanctum. Guild singing tonight, proper. Tommy leads the young ones. Scars remain, but they bind us. Holmes inclined his head, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Scars are sigils of survival, mapping the inner journey. But rest easy, one vein pulses yet. Under the old Roman baths, whispers from there tonight. Watson leaned forward, pipe forgotten. Then we go at dawn. Brotherhood holds. As night deepened, Holmes stood at the window overlooking gaslit Baker Street. The city's heartbeat thrummed below, fraught with peril yet laced with light. Inner transformation anchored him, no longer solitary genius, but conduit for collective redemption. The violin resumed, vigilant strains carrying into fog. Yet in the quiet hours a tremor rippled through the floorboards, faint as a distant sigh. The deep stirred, seeking fresh fissures, and from Whitechapel's depths a new cry echoed, another soul teetering on the brink. Holmes's eyes sharpened. The final test beckoned, grace and grit entwined. London slept unaware, but the guardians watched. Dawn broke over Baker Street like a hesitant promise, grey light filtering through the fog that clung to the cobblestones. Holmes stood motionless at the window, his silhouette sharp against the pallor, the faint tremor from hours before still echoing in his bones. Not an earthquake, no. Something older, hungrier, stirring in the city's underbelly. Watson stirred from his armchair, where sleep had claimed him fitfully, pipe ash scattered like fallen stars on the rug. We move now, John. The Roman baths beneath the tunnel, forgotten even by the rats. That's where the last whisper leads. Watson nodded, rubbing the ache from his shoulder, a souvenir from their last descent. Elias Crowe waited below with Tommy, the boy's face pale but set, clutching a lantern as if it were a talisman. Lydia Thorne had slipped away at first light, her ledger tucked into Holmes's coat, her eyes holding a newfound steadiness born of shared secrets confessed in the night. The group descended into the streets, the air thick with coal smoke and the distant clamour of docks. Horse hooves clattered on wet stone, vendors hawked their wares in muffled tones, but Holmes heard only the pull, the insistent tug toward Whitechapel's fringes where the cry had risen. Elias led them through shadowed alleys, his scarred hands gripping a pickaxe like an old friend. "It's the Baths, Governor, built by Romans when London was Londinium. Tunnel digs cracked into 'em years back. Men felt it then, cold that bites the marrow, voices like drowned bells. They reached the Thames's edge, the river a sluggish serpent under iron bridges, its surface rippling with secrets. The Thames Tunnel entrance loomed, its arched maw yawning from Brunel's era, now a haunt for the desperate. But they veered eastward to a forgotten grate near the Rotherhithe pier, rusted and half-buried in silt. Crowe heaved it open with a grunt, the metal screeching like a warning. Lanterns flickered to life as they descended a crumbling stair, the air turning fetid, laced with brine and decay. Steps gave way to uneven stone, Roman mosaic fragments crunching underfoot, faded gods and nymphs staring blindly from the gloom. Water dripped in rhythmic torment, each drop amplifying the pulse Holmes felt in his chest, a rhythm syncing with his own heartbeat. Deeper. The passage narrowed, walls slick with moisture that gleamed unnaturally, as if lit from within by some phosphorescent malice. Tommy clung to Elias, whispering prayers his father had taught him in the guild's gatherings, simple words of light piercing dark. Watson's revolver weighed heavy in his pocket, but he kept pace with Holmes, whose eyes darted like a hawk's, cataloguing every anomaly. Unnatural frost on ancient tiles, scratches that form no human pattern. A sob echoed ahead, raw, human, pulling them onward. They emerged into the baths proper, a cavernous chamber where vaulted ceilings arched like a cathedral's ribs, half-flooded pools stagnant and black. Steam rose faintly, carrying the stench of rot. In the centre, hunched against a pillar, was a man, gaunt, trembling, clothes torn and muddied. Not one of the lost diggers, but fresh prey, a young labourer from the wharves, eyes wild with terror. "Help." "It took me Mauler, pulled him under, said it'd take me next." Holmes knelt, voice steady as bedrock. "Your name?" "J. Jack Tanner, sir. I was mending a breach in the tunnel wall, night shift. Me mate he heard singing. Beautiful, like angels. Followed it down here through a fissure. Something rose, cold hands, eyes like voids. Dragged him screaming. It whispered my name after." Elias growled low, pickaxe ready. The deep's last tendril. Hale's greed widened the cracks. Now it hungers for more. The air thickened, temperature plummeting, breaths clouding before their faces. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, coiling from the pools like living ink. Holmes felt it then, the assault on his mind insidious as fog. Visions assailed him, his own failures magnified, Watson's loyalty a lie, the digger's screams his fault. Reason faltered, hubris rearing, why fight what logic deemed impossible? No. He clenched his fists, the silver ring from the guild's fire glinting, its inscription, grace endures, burning into his palm. Inner voice rose, not cold deduction, but something warmer, forged in the wreckage. Truth demands witness, not surrender. John, the lanterns, to the pools. Salt from the river, mix it, disrupt the brine. Watson moved swiftly, scooping brackish water, Elias adding handfuls of coarse salt from his pouch, a guild remedy whispered in hymns. Tommy chanted softly, his boyish voice cutting the gloom like a blade. Lydia's absence gnawed at Holmes. Had she foreseen this pullback to shadows? The shadows surged, forming a shape, amorphous, towering, tendrils questing toward Tanner. The young man screamed, scrambling back, but Holmes interposed, violin case discarded, his meerschaum pipe somehow in hand, stem pointed like a ward. "Back! Your reign ends in light, not abyss." The entity recoiled at his voice, the words laced with conviction born of transformation, not mere logic, but grace intertwined, effort meeting mercy. Watson hurled the salted brine, hissing contact filling the air with acrid steam. Elias swung the pickaxe, shattering a stalactite that crumbled into the pool, sending ripples that glowed faintly blue. Tanner gasped, pulling himself upright, eyes clearing. It's weakening. But it spoke of others, still trapped, begging release. Holmes nodded, sweat beading despite the chill. The final vein. We seal it. But as the shadow writhed, contracting into the depths, a new sound pierced, a woman's cry, sharp and familiar. Lydia. From a side tunnel, footsteps frantic. Holmes. It's Graves, Inspector Graves. He followed Hale's trail alone, down here, thinking it's smugglers. The deep has him. Watson's face hardened. The rival turned prey. We can't leave him. Elias hefted his tool. Guild don't abandon none, not even coppers. They plunged into the adjoining passage, lanterns swinging wild, the air growing denser, pressing like a vice on lungs. Holmes led, heart pounding with the weight of choice, not just salvation but forgiveness for old foes. Graves, the skeptic who'd mocked his methods, now ensnared by the very irrational he'd denied. The tunnel opened to a flooded antechamber, Roman baths submerged to waists, water icy and churning. There Graves thrashed against invisible bonds, portly frame half-submerged, face contorted in terror. Holmes. God, no, it's real. Logic. Failed. Holmes waded in, water numbing his legs, reaching out. Hold fast, Inspector. Reason shows the path. Grace pulls you through. Together they hauled him free, Elias and Watson anchoring ropes improvised from belts and sashes. Graves coughed, sputtering, eyes meeting Holmes's with raw humility. No barbs, only gratitude unspoken. As the waters stilled, the tremor ceased, the deep's final sigh echoing into silence. They emerged into morning light, battered but unbroken, Tanner and Graves leaning on the others. Baker Street called, but Holmes paused at the grate, gazing back. One fissure sealed, yet scars linger. The inner journey persists. Back at the lodgings, Mrs. Hudson's stew warmed them, hymns from Tommy's lips mingling with pipe smoke. Lydia confessed her detour, tracking Graves to prevent folly. Crowe clasped hands with the inspector, brotherhood forged in depths. Holmes stood apart, violin in hand, drawing notes of quiet triumph. Transformation anchored him, reason and faith entwined. But as evening fell, a letter arrived, sealed with Hale's crest, posthumous. Inside, coordinates to a hidden chamber, the true heart, where remnants pulsed. The ultimate confrontation loomed, redemption's edge sharp. Holmes stared at the letter in the flickering gaslight of Baker Street, the parchment crisp under his fingers, Hale's wax seal cracked like a fragile vow. The coordinates sketched in precise ink pointed to a forgotten spur of the Thames Tunnel, sealed since the great flood of '47, where the river's wrath had claimed lives and secrets alike. His mind raced, piecing the fragments. Hale's confession, not of greed alone, but of a deeper pact, born in desperation to fund his crumbling legacy. Reason demanded caution, yet the pull of unfinished truth tugged like an undercurrent, whispering of grace beyond logic. Watson settled into his armchair, pipe clenched between teeth, eyes heavy with the day's toll. You've bested the depths once more, Holmes. Graves lives, the men breathe free air. Isn't that victory enough? Holmes folded the missive, his hawkish features sharpening in resolve. Victory, my dear Watson, is not sealed fissures but healed wounds. Hale's ghost bids us finish what pride began. Elias, Lydia, will you walk this shadowed path with me? Elias Crowe nodded from the corner, his scarred hands wrapping around a mug of Mrs. Hudson's strong tea, steam rising like morning mist over the docks. Guild code, sir. We dug too deep once. Now we dig for light. Tanner'd want it so. Lydia Thorne smoothed her velvet skirts, raven hair catching the fire's glow, her pale face a mask of quiet fire. Victor owed me truths long buried. For the lost, and for what remains of my heart, yes. They gathered provisions under cover of night, lanterns oiled fresh, ropes coiled tight, Watson's medical kit stocked against the unseen. Graves, still weak from his ordeal, pressed a Scotland Yard key into Holmes's palm. Use it wisely, Holmes. You've earned my trust, though it chafes like wet wool. Dawn's first grey light filtered through London's fog as they descended once more into the Thames Tunnel's moor, the Rotherhithe shaft echoing their footsteps like distant thunder. The air thickened with brine and decay, walls slick with moisture that wept from unseen cracks. Holmes led, deerstalker shadowing his eyes, every sense attuned to the pulse beneath, the faint vibration that had lured Hale to ruin. "This hidden chamber," Watson murmured, gripping his stick like a talisman. Hale's maps marked it as the Devil's Vestibule. Roman footings, they said, predating Brunel's shield. Superstition or not, it swallowed men whole. Elias grunted, hefting his pick. Superstition's what cowards call fear a god. But down here you feel him, or it, watching. The passage narrowed, forcing single file, lanterns casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres. Lydia's breath came steady, her widow's resolve steeling against memories of lovers claimed by these depths. Holmes paused at a rusted grate, Hale's key turning with a groan that reverberated through stone. Beyond lay the chamber, a cavernous hollow, vaulted like a forgotten cathedral, floor littered with shattered tools and bones picked clean by time or tide. In the center, a pool of black water, still as death, reflecting their lights in fractured stars. Around it, crude altars, candles long snuffed, symbols carved hasty into rock. Circles entwined with crosses inverted, pleas etched in desperation. Hale's final stand. Holmes knelt, tracing an inscription. "Forgive us our depths, as we forgive those who dig against us." His voice softened, the great detective pierced by a father's folly. Victor sought fortune here, not malice, but the bargain. It twisted him. A low rumble stirred the pool, ripples spreading like whispers. Lydia stepped forward, her voice cutting the hush. "He spoke of voices, Victor did. In dreams? Promising gold if we'd but listen. I thought him mad." Then the men vanished. Watson shone his lantern closer, revealing submerged ledges, relics glinting, Roman coins, Victorian picks fused in corrosion. This was no mere dig. Ritual, perhaps, born of Hale's despair. Elias crossed himself, old habits surfacing. Guild tales spoke of it, the deep gate. Men entered seeking wealth, emerged hollow. Faith kept the rest away. Holmes straightened, logic warring with the chill in his veins. Faith, Elias, or the terror of the unknown. Yet here we stand, drawn by the same call. Observe. The water clears. Indeed, the murk parted, revealing a chest at the pool's heart, iron-bound and barnacle-crusted. Holmes waded in, water lapping cold to his thighs, the others anchoring ropes to his waist. His fingers pried the lid, hinges protesting like damned souls. Inside, not gold, but journals, Hale's hand chronicling the madness, debts mounting, magnates pressing, a voice from the depths offering release in exchange for tribute. 41 survived by renouncing the lure. 61 clung to greed, claimed by flood or folly. The final entry, "Holmes will come, let him judge." Tears traced Lydia's cheeks, unseen in shadow. He was lost long before the tunnel. Pride blinded him to grace. Watson clasped Holmes's shoulder as they hauled the chest free. "You've unraveled it, old friend. The macabre tale ends, not in horror, but mercy." But Holmes's gaze fixed on a fissure beyond the pool, faint light pulsing within, warm unlike the cold Thames glow. "Not yet, Watson. The true heart beats on. Hale's redemption demands we face it." The rumble swelled, stones shifting, water surging ankle deep. Elias swung his pick, shoring the walls. "It's wakin'! The deep don't yield easy." They retreated, chest secured, but Holmes lingered. Violin case from his satchel opened. He drew the bow across strings, notes piercing the gloom. Bach's air, solemn and soaring. A bridge between reason and the divine. The pulse steadied, the fissure calming as if in reverence. Back on the surface, gasping fresh air laced with coal smoke, they sealed the grate with Graves's aid, now arrived with reinforcements. The inspector nodded solemnly. "Case closed, Holmes, but changemen tell it." At Baker Street that eve, the group gathered, journals pored over by lamplight. "Mrs. Hudson's bread and ale fortified weary frames, hymns hummed low by Elias, Lydia's hand finding Watson's in quiet alliance. Holmes paced, inner turmoil etching lines deeper. Logic exposed the lie, grace revealed the cost. His arc bent toward humility, no genius above redemption. Yet as night deepened, a whisper echoed in his mind, the fisher's light calling. One final test loomed, not of intellect, but surrender. Tomorrow they would return, not as hunters but pilgrims. Watson watched his friend, pipe smoke curling heavenward. Whatever awaits, Holmes, we're with you. The journey transforms us all. Holmes met his gaze, a rare smile cracking the mask. Indeed, Watson, from rock bottom of reason to peaks of faith, but the edge sharpens. In the quiet, Tommy Tanner, recovered and mending, clasped hands in circle. Elias, Lydia, Graves, all scarred yet standing. Brotherhood reborn in depths defied. Dawn promised confro.